there was a mob around the First National Bank. We pushed through it to the door where we found sour-faced McGraw. Was 6 of them masked, he reported to the chief as we went inside. They hit it about 2:30. 5 of them got away clean with the jack. The watchman here dropped one of them, Jerry Hooper. He's over on the bench, cold. We got the roads blocked and I wired around if it ain't too late. Last seen of them was when they made the turn into King Street in a black Lincoln. We went over to look at the dead Jerry, lying on one of the lobby benches with a brown robe over him. The bullet had gone in under his left shoulder blade. The bank watchman, a harmless-looking old duffer, pushed up his chest and told us about it. There wasn't no chance to do nothing at first. They were in 'fore anybody knew anything. And maybe they didn't work fast, right down the line, scooping it up. No chance to do anything then. But I says to myself, all righty, young fellows, you've got it all your own way now, but wait till you try to leave. And I was as good as my word, you bet you. I runs right to the door after them and cut loose with the old firearm. I got that fellow just as he was stepping into the car. I bet you I'd have got more of them if I'd have had more cartridges, because it's kind of hard shooting down like that, standing in the... Noonan stopped the monologue by patting the old duffer's back till his lungs were empty, telling him, "That certainly is fine. That certainly is fine." McGraw pulled the robe up over the dead man again and growled, "Nobody can identify any body. But with Jerry on it, it's a cinch it was Whisper's caper." The chief nodded happily and said, "I'll leave it in your hands, Mac. Going to poke around here or going back to the hall with me?" he asked me. "Neither. I've got a date and I want to get into dry shoes." Dinah Brand's little Marmon was standing in front of the hotel. I didn't see her. I went up to my room, leaving the door unlocked. I had got my hat and coat off when she came in without knocking. "My God, you keep a boozy smelling room," she said. "It's my shoes." Noonan took me wading in rum. She crossed to the window, opened it, sat on the sill, and asked, "What was that for?" "He thought he was going to find your Max out in a dump called Cedar Hill Inn. So we went out there, shot the joint silly, murdered some Dagos, spilled gallons of liquor, and left the place burning." Cedar Hill Inn? I thought it had been closed up for a year or more. It looked it, but it was somebody's warehouse. "But you didn't find Max there?" she asked. "While we were there, he seems to have been knocking over Elihu's First National Bank." "I saw that," she said. "I had just come out of Bengren's, the store 2 doors away. I had just got in my car when I saw a big boy backing out of the bank, carrying a sack and a gun with a black handkerchief over his face." "Was Max with them?" "No, he wouldn't be. He'd send Jerry and the boys. That's what he has them for." Jerry was there. I knew him as soon as he got out of the car, in spite of the black handkerchief. They all had black ones. 4 of them came out of the bank, running down to the car at the curb. Jerry and another fellow were in the car. When the 4 came across the sidewalk, Jerry jumped out and went to meet them. That's when the shooting started and Jerry dropped. The others jumped in the bus and lit out. "How about that dough you owe me?" I counted out 10 $20 bills and a dime. She left the window to come for them. "That's for pulling Dan off so you could cop Max," she said when she had stowed the money away in her bag. "Now how about what I was to get for showing you where you could turn up the dope on his killing Tim Noonan? You'll have to wait till he's indicted." "How do I know the dope's any good?" She frowned and asked, "What do you do with all the money you don't spend?" Her face brightened. "You know where Max is now?" "No." "What's it worth to know?" "Nothing. I'll tell you for $100. I wouldn't want to take advantage of you that way. I'll tell you for $50. I shook my head. 25. "I don't want him," I said. "I don't care where he is. Why don't you peddle the news to Noonan?" "Yes, and try to collect. Do you only perfume yourself with booze, or is there any for drinking purposes?" "Here's a bottle of so-called Dewar that I picked up at Cedar Hill this afternoon. There's a bottle of King George in my bag. What's your choice?" She voted for King George. We had a drink apiece straight, and I said, "Sit down and play with it while I change clothes." When I came out of the bathroom 25 minutes later, She was sitting at the secretary, smoking a cigarette and studying a memoranda book that had been in a side pocket of my Gladstone bag. "I guess these are the expenses you've charged up on other cases," she said without looking up. "I'm damned if I can see why you can't be more liberal with me. Look, here's a $600 item marked INF. That's information you bought from somebody, isn't it? And here's 150 below it, top, whatever that is. And here's another day when you spent nearly $1,000. They must be telephone numbers," I said, taking the book from her. "Where were you raised?" Fanning my baggage. "I was raised in a convent," she told me. "I won the Good Behavior Prize every year I was there. I thought little girls who put extra spoons of sugar in their chocolate went to hell for gluttony. I didn't even know there was such a thing as profanity until I was 18. The first time I heard any, I damn near fainted." She spit on the rug in front of her, tilted her chair back, put her crossed feet on my bed, and asked, "What do you think of that?" I pushed her feet off the bed and said, "I was raised in a waterfront saloon. Keep your saliva off my floor, or I'll toss you out on your neck. Let's have another drink first. Listen, what'll you give me for the inside story of how the boys didn't lose anything building the city hall? The story that was in the papers I sold Donald Wilson? That doesn't click with me. Try another. How about why the first Mrs. Looyard was sent to the insane asylum? No. King, our sheriff, $8,000 in debt 4 years ago, now the owner of as nice a collection of downtown business blocks as you'd want to see. I can't give you all of it, but I can show you where to get it." "Keep trying," I encouraged her. "No, you don't want to buy anything. You're just hoping you'll pick up something for nothing. This isn't bad scotch. Where'd you get it?" "Brought it from San Francisco with me." "What's the idea of not wanting any of this information I'm offering? Think you can get it cheaper?" "Information of that kind's not much good to me now. I've got to move quick. I need dynamite, something to blow them apart." She laughed and jumped up, her big eyes sparkling. "I've got one of Looyard's cards." "Suppose we sent the bottle of Dewar you copped to Pete with the card. Wouldn't he take it as a declaration of war? If Cedar Hill was a liquor cache, it was Pete's. Wouldn't the bottle and Lou's card make him think Noonan had knocked the place over under orders?" I considered it and said, "Too crude. It wouldn't fool him. Besides, I'd just as lieve have Pete and Lou both against the chief at this stage." She pouted and said, "You think you know everything. You're just hard to get along with. Take me out tonight? I've got a new outfit that'll knock them cockeyed." "Yeah." "Come up for me around 8. She patted my cheek with a warm hand, said, "Ta-ta," and went out as the telephone bell began jingling. "My Chinch and Dix are together at your client's joint," Mickey Linhan reported over the wire. "Mine's been generally busier than a hustler with 2 bunks, though I don't know what the score is yet. Anything new?" I said there wasn't and went into conference with myself across the bed, trying to guess what would come of Noonan's attack on Cedar Hill Inn and Whispers on the First National Bank. I would have given something for ability to hear what was being said up at old Elihu's house by him, Pete the Finn and Lou Yard. But I hadn't that ability, and I was never much good at guessing, so after half an hour I stopped tormenting my brain and took a nap. It was nearly 7 o'clock when I came out of the nap. I washed, dressed, loaded my pockets with a gun and a pint flask of scotch, and went up to Dinah's. New MX, Reno. She took me into her living room, backed away from me, revolved and asked me how I liked the new dress. I said I liked it. She explained that the color was rose beige and that the dinguses on the side were something or other winding up. "And you really think I look good in it?" "You always look good," I said. "Lou Yard and Pete the Finn went calling on old Elihu this afternoon." She made a face at me and said, "You don't give a damn about my dress." "What did they do there?" "A pow-wow, I suppose." She looked at me through her lashes and asked, "Don't you really know where Max is?" Then I did. There was no use admitting I hadn't known all along. I said, "At Wilson's, probably, but I haven't been interested enough to make sure." "That's goofy of you. He's got reasons for not liking you and me. Take Mama's advice and nail him quick if you like living and like having Mama live too." I laughed and said, "You don't know the worst of it. Max didn't kill Noonan's brother. Tim didn't say Max. He tried to say McSwain and died before he could finish. She grabbed my shoulders and tried to shake my 190 pounds. She was almost strong enough to do it. God damn you! Her breath was hot in my face. Her face was white as her teeth. Rouge stood out sharply like red labels pasted on her mouth and cheeks. If you framed him and made me frame him, you've got to kill him now. I don't like being manhandled, even by young women who look like something out of mythology when they're steamed up. I took her hands off my shoulders and said, "Stop belly aching, you're still alive." "Yes, still. But I know Max better than you do. I know how much chance anybody that frames him has got of staying alive long. It would be bad enough if we had got him right, but don't make so much fuss over it. I've framed my millions and nothing's happened to me. Get your hat and coat and we'll feed. You'll feel better then. You're crazy if you think I'm going out." "Not with that." "Stop it, sister. If he's that dangerous, he's just as likely to get you here as anywhere. So what difference does it make?" "It makes a... You know what you're going to do? You're going to stay here until Max is put out of the way. It's your fault and you've got to look out for me. I haven't even got Dan. He's in the hospital." "I can't," I said. "I've got work to do. You're all burnt up over nothing. Max has probably forgotten all about you by now. Get your hat and coat. I'm starving." She put her face close to mine again, and her eyes looked as if they had found something horrible in mine. "Oh, you're rotten," she said. "You don't give a damn what happens to me. You're using me as you use the others. That dynamite you wanted. I trusted you." "You're dynamite, all right, but the rest of it's kind of foolish. You look a lot better when you're happy. Your features are heavy. Anger makes them downright brutal. I'm starving, sister." "You'll eat here," she said. "You're not going to get me out after dark." She meant it. She swapped the rose-beige dress for an apron and took inventory of the icebox. There were potatoes, lettuce, canned soup, and half a fruitcake. I went out and got a couple of steaks, rolls, asparagus, and tomatoes. When I came back, she was mixing gin, vermouth, and orange bitters in a quart shaker, not leaving a lot of space for them to move around in. "Did you see anything?" she asked. I sneered at her in a friendly way. We carried the cocktails into the dining room and played bottoms up while the meal cooked. The drinks cheered her a lot. By the time we sat down to the food, she had almost forgotten her fright. She wasn't a very good cook, but we ate as if she were. We put a couple of ginger ales in on top the dinner. She decided she wanted to go places and do things. No lousy little runt could keep her cooped up, because she had been as square with him as anybody could be until he got nasty over nothing. And if he didn't like what she did, he could go climb trees or jump in lakes, and we'd go out to the Silver Arrow where she had meant to take me, because she had promised Reno she'd show up at his party, and by God she would, and anybody who thought she wouldn't was crazy as a pet cuckoo, and what did I think of that? "Who's Reno?" I asked, while she tied herself tighter in the apron by pulling the strings the wrong way. "Reno Starkey. You'll like him. He's a right guy. I promised him I'd show at his celebration, and that's just what I'll do." "What's he celebrating? What the hell's the matter with this lousy apron?" "He was sprung this afternoon." "Turn around and I'll unwind you." What was he in for? Stand still. "Blowing a safe 6 or 7 months ago. Turlock's the jeweler, Reno, Put Collings, Blackie Whalen, Hank O'Mara, and a little lame guy called Step and a Half. They had plenty of cover, Lou Yard, but the Jewelers Association dicks tied the job to them last week, so Noonan had to go through the motions. It doesn't mean anything. They got out on bail at 5 o'clock this afternoon, and that's the last anybody will ever hear about it. Reno's used to it. He was already out on bail for 3 other capers. Suppose you mix another little drink while I'm inserting myself in the dress." The Silver Arrow was halfway between Personville and Mock Lake. "It's not a bad dump," Dinah told me as her little Mormon carried us toward it. "Polly Devoto is a good scout, and anything she sells you is good, except maybe the bourbon. That always tastes a little bit like it had been drained off a corpse. You'll like her. You can get away with anything out here so long as you don't get noisy. She won't stand for noise." There it is. See the red and blue lights through the trees. We rode out of the woods into full view of the roadhouse, a very electric-lighted imitation castle set close to the road. "What do you mean she won't stand for noise?" I asked, listening to the chorus of pistols singing bang, bang, bang. "Something up," the girl muttered, stopping the car. Two men dragging a woman between them ran out of the roadhouse's front door, ran away into the darkness. A man sprinted out a side door, away. The guns sang on. I didn't see any flashes. Another man broke out and vanished around the back. A man leaned far out a front second-story window, a black gun in his hand. Dinah blew her breath out sharply. From a hedge by the road, a flash of orange pointed briefly up at the man in the window. His gun flashed downward. He leaned farther out. No second flash came from the hedge. The man in the window put a leg over the sill, bent, hung by his hands, dropped. Our car jerked forward. Dinah's lower lip was between her teeth. The man who had dropped from the window was gathering himself up on hands and knees. Dinah put her face in front of mine and screamed, "Reno!" The man jumped up, his face to us. He made the road in 3 leaps as we got to him. Dinah had the little Marmon wide open before Reno's feet were on the running board beside me. I wrapped my arms around him and damned near dislocated them, holding him on. He made it as tough as he could for me by leaning out to try for a shot at the guns that were tossing lead all around us. Then it was all over. We were out of range, sight and sound of the Silver Arrow speeding away from Personville. Reno turned around and did his own holding on. I took my arms in and found that all the joints still worked. Dinah was busy with the car. Reno said, "Thanks, kid." I needed pulling out. "That's all right," she told him. "So that's the kind of parties you throw?" "We had guests that wasn't invited. You know the Tanner Road?" "Yes." "Take it. It'll put us over to Mountain Boulevard and we can get back to town that-a-way." The girl nodded, slowed up a little and asked, "Who were the uninvited guests?" "Some plugs that don't know enough to leave me alone." "Do I know them?" she asked, too casually, as she turned the car into a narrower and rougher road. "Let it alone, kid," Reno said. "Better get as much out of the heap as it's got." She prodded another 15 miles an hour out of the Marmon. She had plenty to do now holding the car to the road, and Reno had plenty holding himself to the car. Neither of them made any more conversation until the road brought us into one that had more and better paving. Then he asked, "So you paid Whisper off?" They're saying you turned rat on him." "They would." "What do you think?" "Ditching him was all right, but throwing in with a dick and cracking the works to him is kind of sour. Damned sour, if you ask me." He looked at me while he said it. He was a man of 34 or 5, fairly tall, broad and heavy without fat. His eyes were large, brown, dull, and set far apart in a long, slightly sallow horse face. It was a humorless face, stolid, but somehow not unpleasant. I looked at him and said nothing. The girl said, "If that's the way you feel about it, you can—" "Look out," Reno grunted. We had swung around a curve. A long, black car was straight across the road ahead of us, a barricade. Bullets flew around us. Reno and I threw bullets around while the girl made a polo pony of the little Marmon. She shoved it over to the left of the road, let the left wheels ride the bank high, crossed the road again with Reno's and my weight on the inside, got the right bank under the left wheels just as our side of the car began to lift in spite of our weight, slid us down in the road with our backs to the enemy, and took us out of the neighborhood by the time we had emptied our guns. A lot of people had done a lot of shooting, but so far as we could tell, nobody's bullets had hurt anybody. Reno, holding to the door with his elbows while he pushed another clip into his automatic, said, "Nice work, kid. You handled the bus like you meant it." Dinah asked, "Where now?" "Far away first. Just follow the road. We'll have to figure it out. Looks like they got the burg closed up on us. Keep your dog on it." We put 10 or 12 more miles between Personville and us. We passed a few cars, saw nothing to show we were being chased. A short bridge rumbled under us. Reno said, "Take the right turn at the top of the hill." We took it, into a dirt road that wound between trees down the side of a rock-ridged hill. 10 miles an hour was fast going here. After 5 minutes of creeping along, Reno ordered a halt. We heard nothing, saw nothing during the half hour we sat in darkness. Then Reno said, "There's an empty shack a mile down the way. We'll camp there, huh? There's no sense trying to crash the city line again tonight." Dinah said she would prefer anything to being shot at again. I said it was all right with me, though I would rather have tried to find some path back to the city. We followed the dirt track cautiously until our headlights settled on a small clapboard building that badly needed the paint it had never got. "Is this it?" Dinah asked Reno. "Uh-huh. Stay here till I look it over." He left us, appearing soon in the beam of our lights at the shack door. He fumbled with keys at the padlock, got it off, opened the door, and went in. Presently he came to the door and called, "All right, come in and make yourselves to home." Dinah cut off the engine and got out of the car. "Is there a flashlight in the car?" I asked. She said, "Yes," gave it to me, yawned. "My God, I'm tired. I hope there's something to drink in the hole." I told her I had a flask of scotch. The news cheered her up. The shack was a one-room affair that held an army cot covered with brown blankets, a deal table with a deck of cards and some gummy poker chips on it, a brown iron stove, 4 chairs, an oil lamp, dishes, pots, pans, and buckets, 3 shelves with canned food on them, a pile of firewood, and a wheelbarrow. Reno was lighting the lamp when we came in. He said, "Not so tough. I'll hide the heap, and then we'll be all set till daylight." Dinah went over to the cot, turned back the covers, and reported, "Maybe there's things in it, but anyway, it's not alive with them. Now let's have that drink." I unscrewed the flask and passed it to her while Reno went out to hide the car. When she had finished, I took a shot. The purr of the Marmon's engine got fainter. I opened the door and looked out. Downhill, through trees and bushes, I could see broken chunks of white light going away. When I lost them for good, I returned indoors and asked the girl, "Have you ever had to walk home before?" "What?" "Reno's gone with the car." "The lousy tramp! Thank God he left us where there's a bed, anyway." "That'll get you nothing." "No? No. Reno had a key to this dump. 10 to 1 the birds after him know about it. That's why he ditched us here. We're supposed to argue with them, hold them off his trail a while." She got up wearily from the cot, cursed Reno, me, all men from Adam on, and said disagreeably, "You know everything. What do we do next?" "We find a comfortable spot in the great open spaces, not too far away, and wait to see what happens." "I'm going to take the blankets." "Maybe one won't be missed, but you'll tip our mitts if you take more than that." "Damn your mitts," she grumbled, but she took only 1 blanket. I blew out the lamp, padlocked the door behind us, and with the help of the flashlight picked a way through the undergrowth. On the hillside above, we found a little hollow from which road and shack could be not too dimly seen through foliage thick enough to hide us, unless we showed a light. I spread the blanket there, and we settled down. The girl leaned against me and complained that the ground was damp, that she was cold in spite of her fur coat, that she had a cramp in her leg, and that she wanted a cigarette. I gave her another drink from the flask. That bought me 10 minutes of peace. Then she said, "I'm catching cold. By the time anybody comes, if they ever do, I'll be sneezing and coughing loud enough to be heard in the city." "Just once," I told her. "Then you'll be all strangled. There's a mouse or something crawling under the blanket. Probably only a snake. Are you married?" "Don't start that." "Then you are?" "No." "I'll bet your wife's glad of it." I was trying to find a suitable comeback to that wisecrack when a distant light gleamed up the road. It disappeared as I shushed the girl. "What is it?" she asked. "A light. It's gone now. Our visitors have left their car and are finishing the trip afoot." A lot of time went by. The girl shivered with her cheek warm against mine. We heard footsteps, saw dark figures moving on the road and around the shack, without being sure whether we did or didn't. A flashlight ended our doubt by putting a bright circle on the shack's door. A heavy voice said, "We'll let the broad come out." There was a half-minute of silence while they waited for a reply from indoors. Then the same heavy voice asked, "Coming?" Then more silence. Gunfire, a familiar sound tonight, broke the silence. Something hammered boards. "Come on," I whispered to the girl. We'll have a try at their car while they're making a racket." "Let them alone," she said, pulling my arm down as I started up. "I've had enough of it for one night. We're all right here." "Come on," I insisted. She said, "I won't." And she wouldn't. And presently, while we argued, it was too late. The boys below had kicked in the door, found the hut empty, and were bellowing for their car. It came, took 8 men aboard, and followed Reno's track downhill. "We might as well move in again," I said. "It's not likely they'll be back this way tonight." "I hope to God there's some scotch left in that flask," she said, as I helped her stand up. 18th Painter Street. The shack's supply of canned goods didn't include anything that tempted us for breakfast. We made the meal of coffee cooked in very stale water from a galvanized pail. A mile of walking brought us to a farmhouse where there was a boy who didn't mind earning a few dollars by driving us to town in the family Ford. He had a lot of questions, to which we gave him phony answers or none. He set us down in front of a little restaurant in Upper King Street, where we ate quantities of buckwheat cakes and bacon. A taxi put us at Dinah's door, a little before 9 o'clock. I searched the place for her, from roof to cellar, and found no signs of visitors. "When will you be back?" she asked as she followed me to the door. "I'll try to pop in between now and midnight, if only for a few minutes." "Where does Lou Yard live?" 1622 Painter Street. Painter's 3 blocks over. 1622's 4 blocks up. What are you going to do there? Before I could answer, she put her hands on my arm and begged, "Get Max, will you? I'm afraid of him. Maybe I'll sick Noonan on him a little later. It depends on how things work out." She called me a damn double-crossing something or other who didn't care what happened to her as long as his dirty work got done. I went over to Painter Street. 1622 was a red brick house with a garage under the front porch. A block up the street, I found Dick Foley in a hired drive-yourself Buick. I got in beside him asking, "What's doing?" "Spot 2? Out 3:30, office to Wilson's. Mickey, 5, home, busy, kept plant, off 3:7. Nothing yet." That was supposed to inform me that he had picked up Lou Yard at 2 the previous afternoon, had shadowed him to Wilson's at 3:30, where Mickey had tailed Pete, had followed Yard away at 5 to his residence, had seen people going in and out of the house, but had not shadowed any of them, had watched the house until 3 this morning, and had returned to the job at 7, and since then had seen nobody go in or out. "You'll have to drop this and take a plant on Wilson's," I said. "I hear Whisper Thaler's holing up there, and I'd like an eye kept on him till I make up my mind whether to turn him up for Noonan or not." Dick nodded and started the engine grinding. I got out and returned to the hotel. There was a telegram from the old man. "Send by first mail full explanation of present operation and circumstances under which you accepted it with daily reports to date." I put the telegram in my pocket and hoped things would keep on breaking fast. To have sent him the dope he wanted at that time would have been the same as sending in my resignation. I bent a fresh collar around my neck and trotted over to the city hall. "Hello," Noonan greeted me. "I was hoping you'd show up. Tried to get you at your hotel, but they told me you hadn't been in." He wasn't looking well this morning, but under his glad-handing he seemed, for a change, genuinely glad to see me. As I sat down, one of his phones rang. He put the receiver to his ear, said, "Yes?" Listened for a moment, said, "You better go out there yourself, Mac," and had to make 2 attempts to get the receiver back on its prong before he succeeded. His face had gone a little doughy, but his voice was almost normal as he told me, "Lou Yard's been knocked off, shot coming down his front steps just now." "Any details?" I asked while I cursed myself for having pulled Dick Foley away from Painter Street an hour too soon. That was a tough break. Noonan shook his head, staring at his lap. "Shall we go out and look at the remains?" I suggested, getting up. He neither got up nor looked up. "No," he said wearily to his lap. "To tell the truth, I don't want to. I don't know as I could stand it just now. I'm getting sick of this killing. It's getting to me, on my nerves, I mean." I sat down again, considered his low spirits, and asked, "Who do you guess killed him?" "God knows," he mumbled. "Everybody's killing everybody. Where's it going to end?" "Think Reno did it." Noonan winced, started to look up at me, changed his mind and repeated, "God knows." I went at him from another angle. "Anybody knocked off in the battle at the Silver Arrow last night?" "Only 3. "Who were they?" "A pair of Johnson brothers named Blackie Whalen and Put Collings that only got out on bail around 5 yesterday, and Dutch Jake Wall, a guerrilla." "What was it all about?" "Just a roughhouse, I guess. It seems that Put and Blackie and the others that got out with them were celebrating with a lot of friends, and it wound up in smoke." "All of them Lou Yard's men?" "I don't know anything about that," he said. I got up, said, "Oh, all right," and started for the door. "Wait," he called. "Don't run off like that." I guess they were. I came back to my chair. Noonan watched the top of his desk. His face was grey, flabby, damp, like fresh putty. "Whisper's staying at Wilson's," I told him. He jerked his head up, his eyes darkened, then his mouth twitched, and he let his head sag again. His eyes faded. "I can't go through with it," he mumbled. "I'm sick of this butchering. I can't stand any more of it." "Sick enough to give up the idea of evening the score for Tim's killing if it'll make peace?" I asked. "I am." "That's what started it," I reminded him. "If you're willing to call it off, it ought to be possible to stop it." He raised his face and looked at me with eyes that were like a dog's looking at a bone. "The others ought to be as sick of it as you are," I went on. "Tell them how you feel about it. Have a get-together and make peace." "They'd think I was up to some kind of a trick," he objected miserably. "Have the meeting at Wilson's." "Whisper's camping there. You'd be the one risking tricks going there. Are you afraid of that?" He frowned and asked, "Will you go with me?" "If you want me." "Thanks," he said. "I'll try it." 19th, the Peace Conference. All the other delegates to the Peace Conference were on hand when Noonan and I arrived at Wilson's home at the appointed time, 9 o'clock that night. Everybody nodded to us, but the greetings didn't go any further than that. Pete the Finn was the only one I hadn't met before. The bootlegger was a big-boned man of 50 with a completely bald head. His forehead was small, his jaws enormous, wide, heavy, bulging with muscle. We sat around Wilson's library table. Old Elihu sat at the head. The short clipped hair on his round pink skull was like silver in the light. His round blue eyes were hard, domineering under their bushy white brows. His mouth and chin were horizontal lines. On his right, Pete the Finn sat watching everybody with tiny black eyes that never moved. Reno Starkey sat next to the bootlegger. Reno's sallow horse face was as stolidly dull as his eyes. Max Thaler was tilted back in a chair on Wilson's left. The little gambler's carefully pressed pants legs were carelessly crossed. A cigarette hung from one corner of his tight-lipped mouth. I sat next to Thaler. Noonan sat on my other side. Elihu Wilson opened the meeting. He said things couldn't go on the way they were going. We were all sensible men, reasonable men, grown men who had seen enough of the world to know that a man couldn't have everything his own way, no matter who he was. Compromises were things everybody had to make sometimes. To get what he wanted, a man had to give other people what they wanted. He said he was sure that what we all most wanted now was to stop this insane killing. He said he was sure that everything could be frankly discussed and settled in an hour without turning Personville into a slaughterhouse. It wasn't a bad oration. When it was over, there was a moment of silence. Thaler looked past me, at Noonan, as if he expected something of him. The rest of us followed his example, looking at the chief of police. Noonan's face turned red, and he spoke huskily. "Whisper, I'll forget you killed Tim." He stood up and held out a beefy paw. "Here's my hand on it." Thaler's thin mouth curved into a vicious smile. "Your bastard of a brother needed killing, but I didn't kill him," he whispered coldly. Red became purple in the chief's face. I said loudly, "Wait, Noonan. We're going at this wrong. We won't get anywhere unless everybody comes clean. Otherwise, we'll all be worse off than before. McSwain killed Tim, and you know it." He started at me with dumbfounded eyes. He gaped. He couldn't understand what I'd done to him. I looked at the others, tried to look virtuous as hell, asked, "That's settled, isn't it? Let's get the rest of the kicks squared." I addressed Pete the Finn. How do you feel about yesterday's accident to your warehouse and the 4 men? One hell of an accident, he rumbled. I explained, Noonan didn't know you were using the joint. He went there thinking it empty, just to clear the way for a job in town. Your men shot first, and then he really thought he had stumbled into Thyla's hideout. When he found he'd been stepping in your puddle, he lost his head and touched the place off. Thyla was watching me with a hard, small smile in eyes and mouth. Reno was all dull stolidity. Elihu Wilson was leaning toward me, his old eyes sharp and wary. I don't know what Noonan was doing. I couldn't afford to look at him. I was in a good spot if I played my hand right, and in a terrible one if I didn't. The men, they get paid for taking chances, Pete the Finn said. For the other 25 grand will make it right. Noonan spoke quickly, eagerly. All right, Pete, all right, I'll give it to you. I pushed my lips together to keep from laughing at the panic in his voice. I could look at him safely now. He was licked, broken, willing to do anything to save his fat neck, or to try to. I looked at him. He wouldn't look at me. He sat down and looked at nobody. He was busy trying to look as if he didn't expect to be carved apart before he got away from these wolves to whom I had handed him. I went on with the work, turning to Elihu Wilson. Do you want to squawk about your bank being knocked over, or do you like it? Max Thyla touched my arm and suggested, We could tell better maybe who's entitled to beef if you'd give us what you've got first. I was glad to. Noonan wanted to nail you, I told him. But he either got word, or expected to get word, from Yard and Wilson here to let you alone. So he thought if he had the bank looted and framed you for it, your backers would ditch you and let him go after you right. Yard, I understand, was supposed to put his okay on all the capers in town. You'd be cutting into his territory and jiping Wilson. That's how it would look. And that was supposed to make them hot enough that they'd help Noonan cop you. He didn't know you were here. Reno and his mob were in the can. Reno was Yard's pup, but he didn't mind crossing up his headman. He already had the idea that he was about ready to take the burg away from Lou. I turned to Reno and asked, Isn't that it? He looked at me woodenly and said, You're telling it. I continued telling it. Noonan fakes a tip that you're at Cedar Hill and takes all the coppers he can't trust out there with him, even cleaning the traffic detail out of Broadway, so Reno would have a clear road. McGraw and the bulls that are in on the play let Reno and his mob sneak out of the hoosegow, pull the job, and duck back in. Nice thing in alibis. Then they got sprung on bail a couple of hours later. It looks as if Lou Yard tumbled. He sent Dutch Jake Wall and some other boys out to the Silver Arrow last night to teach Reno and his pals not to take things in their own hands like that. But Reno got away and got back to the city. It was either him or Lou then. He made sure which it would be by being in front of Lou's house with a gun when Lou came out this morning. Reno seems to have had the right dope, because I noticed that right now he's holding down a chair that would have been Lou Yard's if Lou hadn't been put on ice. Everybody was sitting very still, as if to call attention to how still they were sitting. Nobody could count on having any friends among those present. It was no time for careless motions on anybody's part. If what I had said meant anything one way or the other to Reno, he didn't show it. Thala whispered softly, Didn't you skip some of it? You mean the part about Jerry? I kept on being the life of the party. I was coming back to that. I don't know whether he got away from the can when you crushed out and was caught later, or whether he didn't get away, or why. And I don't know how willingly he went along on the bank caper, but he did go along, and he was dropped and left in front of the bank because he was your right bower, and his being killed there would pin the trick to you. He was kept in the car till the getaway was on. Then he was pushed out and was shot in the back. He was facing the bank with his back to the car when he got his... Thaler looked at Reno and whispered, Well? Reno looked with dull eyes at Thaler and asked calmly, What of it? Thaler stood up, said, Deal me out, and walked to the door. Pete the Finn stood up, leaning on the table with big bony hands, speaking from deep in his chest. Whisper. And when Thaler had stopped and turned to face him, I'm telling you this. You, Whisper, and all of you. That damn gun work is out. All of you understand it. You've got no brains to know what is best for yourselves. So I'll tell you, this busting the town open is no good for business. I won't have it anymore. You be nice boys or I'll make you. I got one army of young fellows that know what to do on any end of a gun. I got to have them in my racket. If I got to use them on you, I'll use them on you. You want to play with gunpowder and dynamite. I'll show you what playing is. You like to fight? I'll give you fighting. Mind what I tell you, that's all. Pete the Finn sat down. Thaler looked thoughtful for a moment and went away without saying or showing what he had thought. His going made the others impatient. None wanted to remain until anybody else had time to accumulate a few guns in the neighborhood. In a very few minutes, Elihu Wilson and I had the library to ourselves. We sat and looked at one another. Presently he said, "How would you like to be chief of police?" "No, I'm a rotten errand boy." "I don't mean with this bunch, after we've got rid of them. And got another just like them." "Damn you," he said. "It wouldn't hurt to take a nicer tone to a man old enough to be your father." "Who curses me and hides behind his age?" Anger brought a vein out blue in his forehead. Then he laughed. "You're a nasty talking lad," he said. "But I can't say you haven't done what I paid you to do. A swell lot of help I've got from you. Did you need wet nursing? I gave you the money and a free hand. That's what you asked for. What more did you want?" "You old pirate," I said. "I blackmailed you into it, and you played against me all the way till now, when even you can see that they're hell-bent on gobbling each other up. Now you talk about what you did for me." "Old pirate," he repeated. "Son, if I hadn't been a pirate, I'd still be working for the Anaconda for wages, and there'd be no Personville Mining Corporation. You're a damned little woolly lamb yourself, I suppose. I was had, son, where the hair was short. There were things I didn't like. Worse things that I didn't know about until tonight. But I was caught and had to bide my time. Why, since that Whisper Thaler has been here, I've been a prisoner in my own home, a damned hostage." "Tough. Where do you stand now?" I demanded. "Are you behind me? If you win—" I got up and said, "I hope to Christ you get caught with them." He said, "I reckon you do, but I won't." He squinted his eyes merrily at me. "I'm financing you. That shows I mean well, don't it? Don't be too hard on me, son. I'm kind of—" I said, "Go to hell," and walked out. 20, Laudanum. Dick Foley in his hired car was at the next corner. I had him drive me over to within a block of Dinah Brand's house and walked the rest of the way. "You look tired," she said when I had followed her into the living room. "Been working?" "Attending a peace conference out of which at least a dozen killings ought to grow." The telephone rang. She answered it and called me, Reno Starkey's voice. "I thought maybe you'd like to hear about Noonan being shot to hell and gone when he got out of his heap in front of his house. You never saw anybody that was deader. Must have had 30 pills pumped in him." "Thanks." Dinah's big blue eyes asked questions. "First fruits of the peace conference, plucked by Whisper Thaler," I told her. "Where's the gin? Reno talking, wasn't it?" "Yeah, he thought I'd like to hear about Poisonville being all out of police chiefs." "You mean Noonan went down tonight, according to Reno. Haven't you got any gin, or do you like making me ask for it? You know where it is? Been up to some of your cute tricks?" I went back into the kitchen, opened the top of the refrigerator, and attacked the ice with an ice pick that had a 6-inch all-sharp blade set in a round blue and white handle. The girl stood in the doorway and asked questions. I didn't answer them while I put ice, gin, lemon juice, and seltzer together in 2 glasses. "What have you been doing?" she demanded as we carried our drinks into the dining room. "You look ghastly." I put my glass on the table, sat down facing it, and complained, "This damned burg's getting me. If I don't get away soon, I'll be going blood simple like the natives. There's been what? A 12.5 murders since I've been here. Donald Wilson, Ike Bush, the 4 Wops and the Dick at Cedar Hill, Jerry, Lou Yard, Dutch Jake, Blackie Whalen and Put Collings at the Silver Arrow, Big Nick, the copper I potted. The blonde kid Whisper dropped here, Yakima Shorty, old Elihu's Prowler, and now Noonan. That's 16 of them in less than a week, and more coming up." She frowned at me and said sharply, "Don't look like that." I laughed and went on, I've arranged a killing or two in my time when they were necessary. But this is the first time I've ever got the fever. It's this damned burg. You can't go straight here. I got myself tangled at the beginning. When old Elihu ran out on me, there was nothing I could do but try to set the boys against each other. I had to swing the job the best way I could. How could I help it if the best way was bound to lead to a lot of killing? The job couldn't be handled any other way without Elihu's backing. Well, if you couldn't help it, what's the use of making a lot of fuss over it? Drink your drink. I drank half of it and felt the urge to talk some more. Play with murder enough, and it gets you one of two ways. It makes you sick, or you get to like it. It got Noonan the first way. He was green around the gills after Yard was knocked off, all the stomach gone out of him, willing to do anything to make peace. I took him in, suggested that he and the other survivors get together and patch up their differences. We had the meeting at Wilson's tonight. It was a nice party, pretending I was trying to clear away everybody's misunderstandings by coming clean all around. I stripped Noonan naked and threw him to them, him and Reno. That broke up the meeting. Whisper declared himself out. Pete told everybody where they stood. He said battling was bad for his bootlegging racket, and anybody who started anything from then on could expect to have his booze guards turned loose on them. Whisper didn't look impressed. Neither did Reno. They wouldn't be, the girl said. What did you do to Noonan? I mean, how did you strip him and Reno? I told the others that he had known all along that McSwain killed Tim. That was the only lie I told them. Then I told them about the bank stick-up being turned by Reno and the chief, with Jerry taken along and dropped on the premises to tie the job to Whisper. I knew that's the way it was if what you told me was right, about Jerry getting out of the car, starting toward the bank and being shot. The hole was in his back. Fitting in with that, McGraw said the last scene of the stick-up car was when it turned into King Street. The boys would be returning to the city hall, to their jail alibi. But didn't the bank watchman say he shot Jerry? That's the way it was in the papers. He said so, but he'd say anything and believe it. He probably emptied his gun with his eyes shut, and anything that fell was his. Didn't you see Jerry drop? Yes, I did, and he was facing the bank, but it was all too confused for me to see who shot him. There were a lot of men shooting, and yeah, they'd see to that. I also advertised the fact, at least it looks like a fact to me, that Reno plugged Lou Yard. This Reno is a tough egg, isn't he? Noonan went watery, but all they got out of Reno was a what of it? It was all nice and gentlemanly. They were evenly divided, Pete and Whisper against Noonan and Reno. But none of them could count on his partner backing him up if he made a play, and by the time the meeting was over, the pairs had been split. Noonan was out of the count, and Reno and Whisper against each other had Pete against them. So everybody sat around and behaved and watched everybody else while I juggled death and destruction. Whisper was the first to leave, and he seems to have had time to collect some rods in front of Noonan's house by the time the chief reached home. The chief was shot down. If Pete the Finn meant what he said, and he has the look of a man who would, he'll be out after Whisper. Reno was as much to blame for Jerry's death as Noonan, so Whisper ought to be gunning for him. Knowing it, Reno will be out to get Whisper first, and that will set Pete on his trail. Besides that, Reno will likely have his hands full, standing off those of the late Lou Yard's underlings who don't fancy Reno as boss. All in all, it's one swell dish. Dinah Brand reached across the table and patted my hand. Her eyes were uneasy. She said, "It's not your fault, darling. You said yourself that there was nothing else you could do. Finish your drink and we'll have another." "There was plenty else I could do," I contradicted her. "Old Elihu ran out on me at first, simply because these birds had too much on him for him to risk a break unless he was sure they could be wiped out. He couldn't see how I could do it, so he played with them. He's not exactly their brand of cutthroat, and besides, he thinks the city is his personal property, and he doesn't like the way they've taken it away from him. I could have gone to him this afternoon and showed him that I had them ruined. He'd have listened to reason. He'd have come over to my side, have given me the support I needed to swing the play legally. I could have done that, but it's easier to have them killed off, easier and surer, and now that I'm feeling this way, more satisfying. I don't know how I'm going to come out with the agency. The old man will boil me in oil if he ever finds out what I've been doing. It's this damn town. Poisonville is right. It's poisoned me. Look, I sat at Wilson's table tonight and played them like you'd play trout and got just as much fun out of it. I looked at Noonan and knew he hadn't a chance in 1,000 of living another day because of what I had done to him, and I laughed and felt warm and happy inside. That's not me. I've got hard skin all over what's left of my soul, and after 20 years of messing around with crime, I can look at any sort of a murder without seeing anything in it but my bread and butter, the day's work. But this getting a rear out of planning deaths is not natural to me. It's what this place has done to me. She smiled too softly and spoke too indulgently. You exaggerate so, honey. They deserve all they get. I wish you wouldn't look like that. You make me feel creepy. I grinned, picked up the glasses, and went out to the kitchen for more gin. When I came back, she frowned at me over anxious dark eyes and asked, Now, what did you bring the ice pick in for? To show you how my mind's running. A couple of days ago, if I thought about it at all, it was as a good tool to pry off chunks of ice. I ran a finger down its half-foot of round steel blade to the needle point. Not a bad thing to pin a man to his clothes with. That's the way I'm betting, on the level. I can't even see a mechanical cigar lighter without thinking of filling one with nitroglycerine for somebody you don't like. There's a piece of copper wire lying in the gutter in front of your house, thin, soft, and just long enough to go around a neck with two ends to hold on. I had one hell of a time to keep from picking it up and stuffing it in my pocket just in case. You're crazy. I know it, that's what I've been telling you. I'm going blood simple. Well, I don't like it. Put that thing back in the kitchen and sit down and be sensible. I obeyed 2/3 of the order. The trouble with you is, she scolded me, your nerves are shot. You've been through too much excitement in the last few days. Keep it up and you're going to have the heebie-jeebies for fair, a nervous breakdown. I held up a hand with spread fingers. It was steady enough. She looked at it and said, That doesn't mean anything. It's inside you. Why don't you sneak off for a couple of days' rest? You've got things here so they'll run themselves. Let's go down to Salt Lake. It'll do you good. Can't, sister. Somebody's got to stay here to count the dead. Besides, the whole program is based on the present combination of people and events. Our going out of town would change that, and the chances are the whole thing would have to be gone over again. Nobody would have to know you were gone, and I've got nothing to do with it. Since when? She leaned forward, made her eyes small, and asked, Now what are you getting at? Nothing. Just wondering how you got to be a disinterested bystander all of a sudden. Forgotten that Donald Wilson was killed because of you, starting the whole thing. Forgotten that it was the dope you gave me on Whisper that kept the job from petering out in the middle. You know just as well as I do that none of that was my fault, she said indignantly. And it's all past anyway. You're just bringing it up because you're in a rotten humor and want to argue. It wasn't past last night when you were scared Stiff Whisper was going to kill you. Will you stop talking about killing? Young Albury once told me Bill Quint had threatened to kill you, I said. Stop it! You seem to have a gift for stirring up murderous notions in your boyfriends. There's Albury waiting trial for killing Wilson. There's Whisper who's got you shivering in corners. Even I haven't escaped your influence. Look at the way I've turned. And I've always had a private notion that Dan Rolfe's going to have a try at you someday. Dan! You're crazy. Why, I dash dash. Yeah. He was a lunger and down and out, and you took him in. You gave him a home and all the laudanum he wants. You use him for errand boy. You slap his face in front of me and slap him around in front of others. He's in love with you. One of these mornings you're going to wake up and find he's whittled your neck away. She shivered, got up and laughed. I'm glad one of us knows what you're talking about if you do, she said as she carried our empty glasses through the kitchen door. I lit a cigarette and wondered why I felt the way I did. Wondered if I were getting psychic. Wondered whether there was anything in this presentiment business or whether my nerves were just ragged. The next best thing for you to do if you won't go away, the girl advised me when she returned with full glasses, is to get plastered and forget everything for a few hours. I put a double slug of gin in yours. You need it. It's not me, I said, wondering why I was saying it, but somehow enjoying it. It's you. Every time I mention killing, you jump on me. You're a woman. You think if nothing's said about it, maybe none of the God only knows how many people in town who might want to will kill you. That's silly. Nothing we say or don't say is going to make whisper, for instance. Please, please stop! I am silly. I'm afraid of the words. I'm afraid of him. Oh, why didn't you put him out of the way when I asked you? Sorry, I said, meaning it. Do you think he... I don't know, I told her. And I reckon you're right. There's no use talking about it. The thing to do is drink, though there doesn't seem to be much body to this gin. That's you, not the gin. Do you want an honest-to-God rear? I'd drink nitroglycerin tonight. That's just about what you're going to get, she promised me. She rattled bottles in the kitchen and brought me in a glass of what looked like the stuff we had been drinking. I sniffed at it and said, Some of Dan's laudanum, huh? He's still in the hospital. Yes, I think his skull is fractured. There's your kick, mister, if that's what you want. I put the dope gin down my throat. Presently I felt more comfortable. Time went by as we drank and talked in a world that was rosy, cheerful, and full of fellowship and peace on earth. Dinah stuck to gin. I tried that for a while too, and then had another gin and laudanum. For a while after that I played a game, trying to hold my eyes open as if I were awake, even though I couldn't see anything out of them. When the trick wouldn't fool her anymore, I gave it up. The last thing I remembered was her helping me on to the living room Chesterfield. 21st, the 17th murder. I dreamed I was sitting on a bench in Baltimore facing the tumbling fountain in Harlem Park, beside a woman who wore a veil. I had come there with her. She was somebody I knew well. But I had suddenly forgotten who she was. I couldn't see her face because of the long black veil. I thought that if I said something to her, I would recognize her voice when she answered. But I was very embarrassed and was a long time finding anything to say. Finally, I asked her if she knew a man named Carroll T. Harris. She answered me, but the roar and swish of the tumbling fountain smothered her voice, and I could hear nothing. Fire engines went out Edmondson Avenue. She left me to run after them. As she ran, she cried, "Fire! Fire!" I recognized her voice then and knew who she was, and knew she was someone important to me. I ran after her, but it was too late. She and the fire engines were gone. I walked streets hunting for her, half the streets in the United States, Gay Street and Mount Royal Avenue in Baltimore, Colfax Avenue in Denver, Etna Road and St. Clair Avenue in Cleveland, McKinney Avenue in Dallas, Lamartine and Cornell and Amory Streets in Boston, Berry Boulevard in Louisville, Lexington Avenue in New York, until I came to Victoria Street in Jacksonville, where I heard her voice again, though I still could not see her. I walked more streets, listening to her voice. She was calling a name, not mine, one strange to me, but no matter how fast I walked or in what direction, I could get no nearer her voice. It was the same distance from me in the street that runs past the Federal Building in El Paso as in Detroit's Grand Circus Park. Then the voice stopped. Tired and discouraged, I went into the lobby of the hotel that faces the railroad station in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, to rest. While I sat there, a train came in. She got off it and came into the lobby, over to me, and began kissing me. I was very uncomfortable because everybody stood around looking at us and laughing. That dream ended there. I dreamed I was in a strange city hunting for a man I hated. I had an open knife in my pocket and meant to kill him with it when I found him. It was Sunday morning. Church bells were ringing. Crowds of people were in the streets, going to and from church. I walked almost as far as in the first dream, but always in this same strange city. Then the man I was after yelled at me, and I saw him. He was a small brown man who wore an immense sombrero. He was standing on the steps of a tall building on the far side of a wide plaza, laughing at me. Between us, the plaza was crowded with people, packed shoulder to shoulder. Keeping one hand on the open knife in my pocket, I ran toward the little brown man, running on the heads and shoulders of the people in the plaza. The heads and shoulders were of unequal heights and not evenly spaced. I slipped and floundered over them. The little brown man stood on the steps and laughed until I had almost reached him. Then he ran into the tall building. I chased him up miles of spiral stairway, always just an inch more than a hand's reach behind him. We came to the roof. He ran straight across to the edge and jumped just as one of my hands touched him. His shoulder slid out of my fingers. My hand knocked his sombrero off and closed on his head. It was a smooth, hard, round head no larger than a large egg. My fingers went all the way around it. Squeezing his head in one hand, I tried to bring the knife out of my pocket with the other, and realized that I had gone off the edge of the roof with him. We dropped giddily down toward the millions of upturned faces in the plaza, miles down. I opened my eyes in the dull light of morning sun filtered through drawn blinds. I was lying face down on the dining room floor, my head resting on my left forearm. My right arm was stretched straight out. My right hand held the round blue and white handle of Dinah Brand's ice pick. The pick's 6-inch needle-sharp blade was buried in Dinah Brand's left breast. She was lying on her back, dead. Her long, muscular legs were stretched out toward the kitchen door. There was a run down the front of her right stocking. Slowly, gently, as if afraid of awakening her, I let go the ice pick, drew in my arm, and got up. My eyes burned. My throat and mouth were hot, woolly. I went into the kitchen, found a bottle of gin, tilted it to my mouth, and kept it there until I had to breathe. The kitchen clock said 7:41. With the gin in me, I returned to the dining room, switched on the lights, and looked at the dead girl. Not much blood was in sight, a spot the size of a silver dollar around the hole the ice pick made in her blue silk dress. There was a bruise on her right cheek, just under the cheekbone. Another bruise, finger-made, was on her right wrist. Her hands were empty. I moved her enough to see that nothing was under her. I examined the room. So far as I could tell, nothing had been changed in it. I went back to the kitchen and found no recognizable changes there. The spring lock on the back door was fastened and had no marks to show it had been monkeyed with. I went to the front door and failed to find any marks on it. I went through the house from top to bottom and learned nothing. The windows were all right, the girl's jewelry on her dressing table, except the 2 diamond rings on her hands, and $400-odd in her handbag on a bedroom chair, were undisturbed. In the dining room again, I knelt beside the dead girl and used my handkerchief to wipe the ice pick handle clean of any prints my fingers had left on it. I did the same to glasses, bottles, doors, light buttons, and the pieces of furniture I had touched, or was likely to have touched. Then I washed my hands, examined my clothes for blood, made sure I was leaving none of my property behind, and went to the front door. I opened it, wiped the inner knob, closed it behind me, wiped the outer knob, and went away. From a drugstore in Upper Broadway, I telephoned Dick Foley and asked him to come over to my hotel. He arrived a few minutes after I got there. Dinah Brand was killed in her house last night or early this morning, I told him, stabbed with an ice pick. The police don't know it yet. I've told you enough about her for you to know that there are any number of people who might have had reason for killing her. There are 3 I want looked up first. Whisper, Dan Rolfe and Bill Quint, the radical fellow. You've got their descriptions. Rolfe is in the hospital with a dented skull. I don't know which hospital. Try the city first. Get hold of Mickey Linehan. He's still camped on Pete the Finn's trail, and have him let Pete rest while he gives you a hand on this. Find out where those 3 birds were last night. And time means something. The little Canadian op had been watching me curiously while I talked. Now he started to say something, changed his mind, grunted, righto, and departed. I went out to look for Reno Starkey. After an hour of searching, I located him by telephone in a Ronnie Street rooming house. "By yourself?" he asked when I had said I wanted to see him. "Yeah." He said I could come out and told me how to get there. I took a taxi. It was a dingy 2-story house near the edge of town. A couple of men loitered in front of a grocer's on the corner above. Another pair sat on the low wooden steps of the house down at the next corner. None of the 4 was conspicuously refined in appearance. When I rang the bell, 2 men opened the door. They weren't so mild-looking either. I was taken upstairs to a front room where Reno, collarless and in shirt sleeves and vest, sat tilted back in a chair with his feet on the windowsill. He nodded his sallow horse face and said, "Pull a chair over." The men who had brought me up went away, closing the door. I sat down and said, "I want an alibi. Dinah Brand was killed last night after I left her. There's no chance of my being copped for it, but with Noonan dead, I don't know how I'm hitched up with the department." I don't want to give them any openings to even try to hang anything on me. If I've got to, I can prove where I was last night. But you can save me a lot of trouble if you will. Reno looked at me with dull eyes and asked, "Why pick on me? You phoned me there last night. You're the only person who knows I was there the first part of the night. I'd have to fix it with you even if I got the alibi somewhere else, wouldn't I?" He asked, "You didn't croak her, did you?" I said no, casually. He stared out the window a little while before he spoke. He asked, "What made you think I'd give you the lift? Do I owe you anything for what you done to me at Wilson's last night?" I said, "I didn't hurt you any. The news was half out anyhow. Whisper knew enough to guess the rest. I only gave you a showdown. What do you care? You can take care of yourself." "I aim to try," he agreed. "All right. You was at the Tanner house in Tanner. That's a little burg 20 to 30 miles up the hill. You went up there after you left Wilson's and stayed till morning. A guy named Ricker that hangs around Murray's with a hire heap drove you up and back. You ought to know what you was doing up there. Give me your cig and I'll have it put on the register." "Thanks," I said as I unscrewed my fountain pen. "Don't say them. I'm doing this because I need all the friends I can get when the time comes that you sit in with me and Whisper and Pete. I don't expect the sour end of it." "You won't get it," I promised. "Who's going to be chief of police?" "McGraw's acting chief. He'll likely cinch it." "How will he play?" "With the fin. Rough stuff will hurt his shop just like it does Pete's. It'll have to be hurt some. I'd be a swell mutt to sit still while a guy like Whisper is on the loose. It's me or him." "Think he croaked the broad?" "He had reason enough," I said as I gave him the slip of paper on which I had written my name. "She double-crossed him, sold him out. Plenty." "You and her was kind of thick, wasn't you?" he asked. I let the question alone, lighting a cigarette. Reno waited a while and then said, "You better hunt up Ricker and let him get a look at you so's he'll know how to describe you if he's asked." A long-legged youngster of 22 or so, with a thin, freckled face around reckless eyes, opened the door and came into the room. Reno introduced him to me as Hank O'Mara. I stood up to shake his hand and then asked Reno, "Can I reach you here if I need to?" "No Peak Murray? I've met him and I know his joint." "Anything you give him will get to me," he said. "We're getting out of here. It's not so good. That Tanner lay is all set." "Right. Thanks. I went out of the house. 22nd, the ice pick. Downtown, I went first to police headquarters. McGraw was holding down the chief's desk. His blonde-lashed eyes looked suspiciously at me, and the lines in his leathery face were even deeper and sourer than usual. "When did you see Dinah Brand last?" he asked without any preliminaries, not even a nod. His voice rasped disagreeably through his bony nose. 10:40 last night, or thereabout," I said. "Why?" "Where?" "Her house." "How long were you there?" "Why, 10 minutes, maybe 15. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why didn't you stay any longer than that?" "What?" I asked, sitting down in the chair he hadn't offered me. "Makes it any of your business?" He glared at me while he filled his lungs so he could yell, "Murder!" in my face. I laughed and said, "You don't think she had anything to do with Noonan's killing?" I wanted a cigarette, but cigarettes were too well known as first aids to the nervous for me to take a chance on one just then. McGraw was trying to look through my eyes. I let him look, having all sorts of confidence in my belief that, like a lot of people, I looked most honest when I was lying. Presently he gave up the eye study and asked, "Why not?" That was weak enough. I said, "All right, why not?" Indifferently offered him a cigarette and took one myself. Then I added, "My guess is that Whisper did it." Was he there? For once McGraw cheated his nose, snapping the words off his teeth. "Was he where?" "At Brand's?" "No," I said, wrinkling my forehead. "Why should he be, if he was off killing Noonan?" "Damn Noonan!" the acting chief exclaimed irritably. "What do you keep dragging him in for?" I tried to look at him as if I thought him crazy. He said, "Dinah Brand was murdered last night." I said, "Yeah? Now will you answer my questions?" "Of course." "I was at Wilson's with Noonan and the others. After I left there around 10:30, I dropped in at her house to tell her I had to go up to Tanner. I had a halfway date with her. I stayed there about 10 minutes, long enough to have a drink. There was nobody else there unless they were hiding. When was she killed? And how? McGraw told me he had sent a pair of his dicks, Shep and Vanneman, to see the girl that morning, to see how much help she could, and would give the department in Copping Whisper for Noonan's murder. The dicks got to her house at 9:30. The front door was ajar. Nobody answered their ringing. They went in and found the girl lying on her back in the dining room, dead, with a stab wound in her left breast. The doctor who examined the body said she had been killed with a slender, round, pointed blade about 6 inches in length at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Bureaus, closets, trunks, and so on had apparently been skillfully and thoroughly ransacked. There was no money in the girl's handbag or elsewhere in the house. The jewel case on her dressing table was empty. 2 diamond rings were on her fingers. The police hadn't found the weapon with which she had been stabbed. The fingerprint experts hadn't turned up anything they could use. Neither doors nor windows seemed to have been forced. The kitchen showed that the girl had been drinking with a guest or guests. 6 inches, round, slim, pointed. I repeated the weapon's description. That sounds like her ice pick. McGraw reached for the phone and told somebody to send Shep and Vanneman in. Shep was a stoop-shouldered tall man whose wide mouth had a grimly honest look that probably came from bad teeth. The other detective was short, stocky, with purplish veins in his nose and hardly any neck. McGraw introduced us and asked them about the ice pick. They had not seen it, were positive it hadn't been there. They wouldn't have overlooked an article of its sort. "Was it there last night?" McGraw asked me. I stood beside her while she chipped off pieces of ice with it. I described it. McGraw told the dicks to search her house again, and then to try to find the pick in the vicinity of the house. "You knew her," he said when Shep and Vanneman had gone. "What's your slant on it?" "Too new for me to have one." I dodged the question. "Give me an hour or two to think it over. What do you think?" He fell back into sourness, growling, "How the hell do I know?" But the fact that he let me go away without asking me any more questions told me he had already made up his mind that Whisper had killed the girl. I wondered if the little gambler had done it, or if this was another of the wrong raps that Poisonville police chiefs liked to hang on him. It didn't seem to make much difference now. It was a cinch he had, personally or by deputy, put Noonan out, and they could only hang him once. There were a lot of men in the corridor when I left McGraw. Some of these men were quite young, just kids. Quite a few were foreigners, and most of them were every bit as tough-looking as any men should be. Near the street door, I met Donna, one of the coppers who had been on the Cedar Hill expedition. "Hello," I greeted him. "What's the mob? Emptying the can to make room for more?" "Them's our new specials," he told me, speaking as if he didn't think much of them. "We're going to have an augmented force." "Congratulations," I said, and went on out. In his pool room, I found Peake Murray sitting at a desk behind the cigar counter talking to 3 men. I sat down on the other side of the room and watched 2 kids knock balls around. In a few minutes, the lanky proprietor came over to me. "If you see Reno sometime," I told him, "you might let him know that Pete the Finn's having his mob sworn in as special coppers." "I might," Murray agreed. Mickey Linehan was sitting in the lobby when I got back to my hotel. He followed me up to my room and reported, "Your Dan Rolfe pulled a sneak from the hospital somewhere after midnight last night. The Crokers are kind of steamed up about it. Seems they were figuring on pulling a lot of little pieces of bone out of his brain this morning. But him and his duds were gone. We haven't got a line on Whisper yet. Dick's out now trying to place Bill Quint. What's what on this girl's carving? Dick tells me you got it before the coppers." The telephone bell rang. A man's voice, carefully oratorical, spoke my name with a question mark after it. I said, "Yeah." The voice said, "This is Mr. Charles Proctor Dawn speaking. I think you will find it well worth your while to appear at my offices at your earliest convenience." "Will I? Who are you?" "Mr. Charles Proctor Dawn, attorney at law. My suite is in the Rutledge block, 310 Green Street. I think you will find it well." "Mind telling me part of what it's about?" I asked. "There are affairs best not discussed over the telephone. I think you will find." All right, I interrupted him again. I'll be around to see you this afternoon if I get a chance. You will find it very, very advisable, he assured me. I hung up on that. Mickey said, you were going to give me the what's what on the brand slaughter. I said, I wasn't. I started to say it oughtn't to be hard to trace Rolf, running around with a fractured skull and probably a lot of bandages. Suppose you try it. Give Hurricane Street a play first. Mickey grinned all the way across his comedian's red face, said, Don't tell me anything that's going on. I'm only working with you. Picked up his hat and left me. I spread myself on the bed, smoked cigarettes end to end, and thought about last night, my frame of mind, my passing out, my dreams, and the situation into which I woke. The thinking was unpleasant enough to make me glad when it was interrupted. Fingernails scratched the outside of my door. I opened the door. The man who stood there was a stranger to me. He was young, thin, and gaudily dressed. He had heavy eyebrows and a small moustache that were coal black against a very pale, nervous, but not timid face. I'm Ted Wright, he said, holding out a hand as if I were glad to meet him. I guess you've heard Whisper talk about me. I gave him my hand, let him in, closed the door and asked, You're a friend of Whisper's? You bet. He held up two thin fingers, pressed tightly together. Just like that, me and him. I didn't say anything. He looked around the room, smiled nervously, crossed to the open bathroom door, peeped in, came back to me, rubbed his lips with his tongue, and made his proposition. I'll knock him off for you for $500,000. Whisper. Yep, and it's dirt cheap. Why do I want him killed? I asked. He unwomaned you, didn't he? Yeah? You ain't that dumb. A notion stirred in my noodle. To give it time to crawl around, I said, Sit down. This needs talking over. It don't need nothing, he said, looking at me sharply, not moving toward either chair. You either want him knocked off or you don't. Then I don't. He said something I didn't catch down in his throat and turned to the door. I got between him and it. He stopped, his eyes fidgeting. I said, So Whisper's dead? He stepped back and put a hand behind him. I poked his jaw, leaning my 190 pounds on the poke. He got his legs crossed and went down. I pulled him up by the wrists, yanked his face close to mine and growled, Come through! What's the racket? I ain't done nothing to you. Let me catch you. Who got Whisper? I don't know nothing at... I let go of one of his wrists, slapped his face with my open hand, caught his wrist again, and tried my luck at crunching both of them while I repeated, Who got Whisper? Dan Rolfe, he whined. He walked up to him and stuck him with the same skewer Whisper had used on the twist. That's right. How do you know it was the one Whisper killed the girl with? Dan said so. What did Whisper say? Nothing. He looked funny as hell, standing there with the butt of the sticker sticking out his side. Then he flashes the rod and puts two pills in Dan, just like one, and the both of them go down together, cracking heads. Dan's all bloody through the bandages. And then what? Then nothing. I roll them over, and they're a pair of stiffs. Every word I'm telling you is gospel. Who else was there? Nobody else. Whisper was hiding out, with only me to go between him and the mob. He killed Noonan himself, and he didn't want to have to trust nobody for a couple of days, till he could see what was what, excepting me. So you, being a smart boy, thought you could run around to his enemies and pick up a little dough for killing him after he was dead. I was clean, and this won't be no place for Whisper's pals when the word gets out that he's croaked, Wright whined. I had to raise a getaway stake. How'd you make out so far? I got a century from Pete and a century and a half from Peak Murray, for Reno, with more promised from both when I turned the trick. The whine changed into boasting as he talked. I bet you I could get McGraw to come across too, and I thought you'd kick in with something. They must be high in the air to toss dough at a woozy racket like that. I don't know, he said superiorly. It ain't such a lousy one at that. He became humble again. Give me a chance, Chief. Don't gum it on me. I'll give you $50 now and a split of whatever I get from McGraw if you'll keep your clam shut till I can put it over and grab a rattler. Nobody but you knows where Whisper is. Nobody else except Dan. That's as dead as he is. Where are they?
The old Redmond warehouse down on Porter Street. In the back, upstairs, Whisper had a room fixed up with a bed, stove, and some grub. Give me a chance. $50 now and a cut on the rest.
I let go of his arm and said, I don't want the dough, but go ahead. I'll lay off for a couple of hours. That ought to be long enough.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks. And he hurried away from me. I put on my coat and hat, went out, found Green Street and the Rutledge block. It was a wooden building a long while past any prime it might ever have had. Mr. Charles Proctor Dawn's establishment was on the second floor. There was no elevator. I climbed a worn and rickety flight of wooden steps. The lawyer had 2 rooms, both dingy, smelly, and poorly lighted. I waited in the outer one while a clerk who went well with the rooms carried my name in to the lawyer. Half a minute later, the clerk opened the door and beckoned me in. Mr. Charles Proctor Dawn was a little fat man of 50-something. He had prying triangular eyes of a very light color, a short fleshy nose, and a fleshier mouth whose greediness was only partly hidden between a ragged grey moustache and a ragged grey Van Dyke beard. His clothes were dark and unclean-looking without actually being dirty. He didn't get up from his desk, and throughout my visit he kept his right hand on the edge of a desk drawer that was some 6 inches open. He said, my dear sir, I am extremely gratified to find that you had the good judgment to recognize the value of my counsel." His voice was even more oratorical than it had been over the wire. I didn't say anything. Nodding his whiskers as if my not saying anything was another exhibition of good judgment, he continued, "I may say, in all justice, that you will find it the invariable part of sound judgment to follow the dictates of my counsel in all cases. I may say this, my dear sir, without false modesty, appreciating with both fitting humility and a deep sense of true and lasting values, my responsibilities as well as my prerogatives and why should I stoop to conceal the fact that there are those who feel justified in preferring to substitute the definite article for the indefinite, recognized and accepted leader of the bar in this thriving state. He knew a lot of sentences like those, and he didn't mind using them on me. Finally, he got along to, thus, that conduct which in a minor practitioner might seem irregular becomes, when he who exercises it occupies such indisputable prominence in his community, and I might say not merely the immediate community, as serves to place him above fear of reproach, simply that greater ethic which scorns the pettier conventionalities when confronted with an opportunity to serve mankind through one of its individual representatives. Therefore, my dear sir, I have not hesitated to brush aside scornfully all trivial considerations of accepted precedent, to summon you, to say to you frankly and candidly, my dear sir, that your interests will best be served by and through retaining me as your legal representative." I asked, "What'll it cost?" "That," he said loftily, "is of but secondary importance. However, it is a detail which has its deserved place in our relationship, and must be not overlooked or neglected. We shall say $1,000 now, later no doubt." He ruffled his whiskers and didn't finish the sentence. I said I hadn't, of course, that much money on me. "Naturally, my dear sir, naturally. But that is of not the least importance in any degree. None whatever. Any time will do for that. Any time up to 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." "At 10 tomorrow," I agreed. "Now I'd like to know why I'm supposed to need legal representatives." He made an indignant face. "My dear sir, this is no matter for jesting, of that I assure you." I explained that I hadn't been joking, that I really was puzzled. He cleared his throat, frowned more or less importantly, said, "It may well be, my dear sir, that you do not fully comprehend the peril that surrounds you, but it is indubitably preposterous that you should expect me to suppose that you are without any inkling of the difficulties, the legal difficulties, my dear sir, with which you are about to be confronted, growing as they do out of occurrences that took place at no more remote time than last night, my dear sir, last night. However, there is no time to go into that now. I have a pressing appointment with Judge Leffner. On the morrow I shall be glad to go more thoroughly into each least ramification of the situation, and I assure you they are many with you. I shall expect you at 10 tomorrow morning."
I promised to be there and went out. I spent the evening in my room drinking unpleasant whiskey, thinking unpleasant thoughts and waiting for reports that didn't come from Mickey and Dick. I went to sleep at midnight. 23rd, Mr. Charles Proctor Dawn. I was half-dressed the next morning when Dick Foley came in. He reported in his word-saving manner that Bill Quint had checked out of the Miners' Hotel at noon the previous day, leaving no forwarding address. A train left Personville for Ogden at 12:35. Dick had wired the Continental's Salt Lake branch to send a man up to Ogden to try to trace Quint. "We can't pass up any leads," I said, "but I don't think Quint's the man we want. She gave him the air long ago. If he had meant to do anything about it, he would have done it before this. My guess is that when he heard she had been killed, he decided to duck, being a discarded lover who had threatened her." Dick nodded and said, "Gunplay out the road last night, hijacking. 4 trucks of hooch nailed, burned." That sounded like Reno Starkey's answer to the news that the big bootleggers mob had been sworn in as special coppers. Mickey Linehan arrived by the time I had finished dressing. "Dan Rolfe was at the house, all right," he reported. "The Greek grocer on the corner saw him come out around 9 yesterday morning. He went down the street wobbling and talking to himself. The Greek thought he was drunk." "How come the Greek didn't tell the police?" Or did he? "Wasn't asked. A swell department this burg's got. What do we do? Find him for them and turn him in with the job all tacked up?" "McGraw has decided Whisper killed her," I said, "and he's not bothering himself with any leads that don't lead that way. Unless he came back later for the ice pick, Rolfe didn't turn the trick. She was killed at 3 in the morning. Rolfe wasn't there at 8:30, and the pick was still sticking in her. It was dash. Dick Foley came over to stand in front of me and ask, "How do you know?" I didn't like the way he looked or the way he spoke. I said, "You know because I'm telling you." Dick didn't say anything. Mickey grinned his half-wit's grin and asked, "Where do we go from here?" "Let's get this thing polished off." "I've got a date for 10, I told them. "Hang around the hotel till I get back. Whisper and Rolfe are probably dead, so we won't have to hunt for them." I scowled at Dick and said, "I was told that." "I didn't kill either of them." The little Canadian nodded without lowering his eyes from mine. I ate breakfast alone and then set out for the lawyer's office. Turning off King Street, I saw Hank O'Mara's freckled face in an automobile that was going up Green Street. He was sitting beside a man I didn't know. The long-legged youngster waved an arm at me and stopped the car. I went over to him and he said, "Reno wants to see you." "Where will I find him?" "Jump in." "I can't go now," I said. "Probably not till afternoon. See Peak when you're ready." I said I would. O'Mara and his companion drove on up Green Street. I walked half a block south to the Rutledge block. With a foot on the first of the rickety steps that led up to the lawyer's floor, I stopped to look at something. It was barely visible back in a dim corner of the first floor. It was a shoe. It was lying in a position that empty shoes don't lie in. I took my foot off the step and went toward the shoe. Now I could see an ankle and the cuff of a black pants leg above the shoe top. That prepared me for what I found. I found Mr. Charles Proctor Dawn huddled among 2 brooms, a mop and a bucket, in a little alcove formed by the back of the stairs and a corner of the wall. His Van Dyke beard was red with blood from a cut that ran diagonally across his forehead. His head was twisted sidewise and backward at an angle that could only be managed with a broken neck. I quoted Noonan's, "What's got to be done has got to be done," to myself, and gingerly pulling one side of the dead man's coat out of the way, emptied his inside coat pocket, transferring a black book and a sheaf of papers to my own pocket. In 2 of his other pockets I found nothing I wanted. The rest of his pockets couldn't be got at without moving him, and I didn't care to do that. 5 minutes later I was back in the hotel, going in through a side door to avoid Dick and Mickey in the lobby and walking up to the mezzanine to take an elevator. In my room I sat down and examined my loot. I took the book first, a small imitation leather memoranda book of the sort that sells for not much money in any stationery store. It held some fragmentary notes that meant nothing to me. and 30-some names and addresses that meant as little, with one exception: Helen Albury, 1229 Hurricane Street. That was interesting because first, a young man named Robert Albury was in prison, having confessed that he shot and killed Donald Wilson in a fit of jealousy aroused by Wilson's supposed success with Dinah Brand. And second, Dinah Brand had lived and had been murdered at 1232 Hurricane Street, across the street from 1229A. I did not find my name in the book. I put the book aside and began unfolding and reading the papers I had taken with it. Here, too, I had to wade through a lot that didn't mean anything to find something that did. This find was a group of 4 letters held together by a rubber band. The letters were in slitted envelopes that had postmarks dated a week apart, on the average. The latest was a little more than 6 months old. The letters were addressed to Dinah Brand. The first, that is, the earliest, wasn't so bad for a love letter. The second was a bit goofier. The third and fourth were swell examples of how silly an ardent and unsuccessful wooer can be, especially if he's getting on in years. The 4 letters were signed by Elihu Wilson. I had not found anything to tell me definitely why Mr. Charles Proctor Dawn had thought he could blackmail me out of $1,000, but I had found plenty to think about. I encouraged my brain with 2 Fatimas and then went downstairs. "Go out and see what you can raise on a lawyer named Charles Proctor Dawn," I told Mickey. "He's got offices in Green Street. Stay away from them. Don't put in a lot of time on him. I just want a rough line quick." I told Dick to give me a 5-minute start and then follow me out to the neighborhood of 1229 Hurricane Street. 1229A was the upper flat in a 2-story building almost directly opposite Dinah's house. 1229 was divided into 2 flats with a private entrance for each. I rang the bell at the one I wanted. The door was opened by a thin girl of 18 or 19 with dark eyes set close together in a shiny, yellowish face under short-cut brown hair that looked damp. She opened the door, made a choked, frightened sound in her throat, and backed away from me, holding both hands to her open mouth. "Miss Helen Albury?" I asked. She shook her head violently from side to side. There was no truthfulness in it. Her eyes were crazy. I said, "I'd like to come in and talk to you a few minutes," going in as I spoke, closing the door behind me. She didn't say anything. She went up the steps in front of me, her head twisted around so she could watch me with her scary eyes. We went into a scantily furnished living room. Dinah's house could be seen from its windows. The girl stood in the center of the floor, her hands still to her mouth. I wasted time and words trying to convince her that I was harmless. It was no good. Everything I said seemed to increase her panic. It was a damned nuisance. I quit trying and got down to business. "You are Robert Albury's sister?" I asked. No reply, nothing but the senseless look of utter fear. I said, "After he was arrested for killing Donald Wilson, you took this flat so you could watch her. What for?" Not a word from her. I had to supply my own answer: revenge. You blamed Dinah Brand for your brother's trouble. You watched for your chance. It came the night before last. You sneaked into her house, found her drunk, stabbed her with the ice pick you found there. She didn't say anything. I hadn't succeeded in jolting the blankness out of her frightened face. I said, "Dawn helped you, engineered it for you. He wanted Elihu Wilson's letters. Who was the man he sent to get them? The man who did the actual killing? Who was he?" That got me nothing. No change in her expression or lack of expression. No word. I thought I would like to spank her. I said, "I've given you your chance to talk. I'm willing to listen to your side of the story, but suit yourself." She suited herself by keeping quiet. I gave it up. I was afraid of her, afraid she would do something even crazier than her silence if I pressed her further. I went out of the flat, not sure that she had understood a single word I had said. At the corner, I told Dick Foley, "There's a girl in there, Helen Albury, 18, 5'6", skinny, not more than 100 if that, eyes close together, brown-yellow skin, brown short hair, straight, got on a grey suit now, tail her. If she cuts up on you, throw her in the can. Be careful, she's crazy as a bedbug." I set out for Peak Murray's dump to locate Reno and see what he wanted. Half a block from my destination, I stepped into an office building doorway to look the situation over. A police patrol wagon stood in front of Murray's. Men were being led, dragged, carried from pool room to wagon. The leaders, draggers, and carriers did not look like regular coppers. They were, I supposed, Pete the Finn's crew, now special officers. Pete, with McGraw's help, apparently was making good his threat to give Whisper and Reno all the war they wanted. While I watched, an ambulance arrived, was loaded, and drove away. I was too far away to recognize anybody or anybodies. When the height of the excitement seemed past, I circled a couple of blocks and returned to my hotel. Mickey Linehan was there with information about Mr. Charles Proctor Dawn. He's the guy that the joke was wrote about. Is he a criminal lawyer? Yes, very. This fellow Albury that you nailed, some of his family hired this bird Dawn to defend him. Albury wouldn't have anything to do with him when Dawn came to see him. This three-named shyster nearly went over himself last year on a blackmail rap. Something to do with a parson named Hill, but squirmed out of it. Got some property out on Libert Street, wherever that is. Want me to keep digging? That'll do. We'll stick around till we hear from Dick. Mickey yawned and said that was all right with him, never being one that had to run around a lot to keep his blood circulating, and asked if I knew we were getting nationally famous. I asked him what he meant by that. I just ran into Tommy Robbins, he said. The Consolidated Press sent him here to cover the doings. He tells me some of the other press associations and a big city paper or two are sending in special correspondents beginning to play our troubles up. I was making one of my favorite complaints, that newspapers were good for nothing except to hash things up so nobody could unhash them, when I heard a boy chanting my name. For a dime, he told me I was wanted on the phone. Dick Foley. She showed right away. To 310 Green Street, full of coppers. Mouthpiece named Dawn killed. Police took her to the hall. She's still there? Yes, in the chief's office. Stick and get anything you pick up to me quick. I went back to Mickey Linehan and gave him my room key and instructions. Camp in my room. Take anything that comes for me and pass it on. I'll be at the Shannon around the corner, registered as J.W. Clark. Tell Dick and nobody. Mickey asked, "What the hell?" Got no answer and moved his loose-jointed bulk toward the elevators. 24th. Wanted. I went around to the Shannon Hotel, registered my alias, paid my day's rent, and was taken to room 321. An hour passed before the phone rang. Dick Foley said he was coming up to see me. He arrived within 5 minutes. His thin, worried face was not friendly, neither was his voice. He said, "Warrant's out for you. Murder, 2 counts. Brandon Dawn, I phoned. Mickey said he'd stick. Told me you were here. Police got him. Grilling him now." "Yeah, I expected that." "So did I," he said sharply. I said, making myself drawl the words, "You think I killed them, don't you, Dick?" "If you didn't, it's a good time to say so. Going to put the finger on me?" I asked. He pulled his lips back over his teeth. His face changed from tan to buff. I said, "Go back to San Francisco, Dick. I've got enough to do without having to watch you." He put his hat on very carefully and very carefully closed the door behind him when he went out. At 4 o'clock I had some lunch, cigarettes, and an Evening Herald sent up to me. Dinah Brand's murder and the newer murder of Charles Proctor Dawn divided the front page of the Herald, with Helen Albury connecting them. Helen Albury was, I read, Robert Albury's sister, and she was, in spite of his confession, thoroughly convinced that her brother was not guilty of murder, but the victim of a plot. She had retained Charles Proctor Dawn to defend him. I could guess that the late Charles Proctor had hunted her up, and not she him. The brother refused to have Dawn or any other lawyer, but the girl, properly encouraged by Dawn, no doubt, had not given up the fight. Finding a vacant flat across the street from Dinah Brand's house, Helen Albury had rented it, and had installed herself therein with a pair of field glasses and one idea, to prove that Dinah and her associates were guilty of Donald Wilson's murder. I, it seems, was one of the associates. The Herald called me a man supposed to be a private detective from San Francisco, who has been in the city for several days, apparently on intimate terms with the police, terms with Max, Whisper, Thaler, Daniel Rolfe, Oliver, Reno, Starkey, and Dinah Brand. We were the plotters who had framed Robert Albury. The night that Dinah had been killed, Helen Albury, peeping through her window, had seen things that were, according to the Herald, extremely significant when considered in connection with the subsequent finding of Dinah's dead body. As soon as the girl heard of the murder, she took her important knowledge to Charles Proctor Dawn. He, the police learned from his clerks, immediately sent for me and had been closeted with me that afternoon. He had later told his clerks that I was to return the next morning at 10. This morning I had not appeared to keep my appointment. At 25 minutes past 10, the janitor of the Rutledge block had found Charles Proctor Dawn's body in a corner behind the staircase, murdered. It was believed that valuable papers had been taken from the dead man's pockets. At the very moment that the janitor was finding the dead lawyer, I, it seems, was in Helen Albury's flat, having forced an entrance and was threatening her. After she succeeded in throwing me out, she hurried to Dawn's offices, arriving while the police were there, telling them her story. Police sent to my hotel had not found me there, but in my room they had found one Michael Linehan, who also represented himself to be a San Francisco private detective. Michael Linehan was still being questioned by the police. Whisper, Reno, Rolf and I were being hunted by the police, charged with murder. Important developments were expected. Page 2 held an interesting half-column. Detectives Shep and Vanneman, the discoverers of Dinah Brand's body, had mysteriously vanished. Foul play on the part of us associates was feared. There was nothing in the paper about last night's hijacking, nothing about the raid on Peak Murray's joint. I went out after dark. I wanted to get in touch with Reno. From a drugstore, I phoned Peak Murray's pool room. "Is Peak there?" I asked. "This is Peak," said a voice that didn't sound anything at all like his. "Who's talking?" I said disgustedly. "This is Lillian Gish." Hung up the receiver and removed myself from the neighborhood. I gave up the idea of finding Reno and decided to go calling on my client, old Elihu, and tried to blackjack him into good behavior with the love letters he had written Dinah Brand and which I had stolen from Dawn's remains. I walked, keeping to the darker side of the darkest streets. It was a fairly long walk for a man who sneers at exercise. By the time I reached Wilson's block, I was in bad enough humor to be in good shape for the sort of interviews he and I usually had. But I wasn't to see him for a little while yet. I was 2 pavements from my destination when somebody s***ed at me. I probably didn't jump 20 feet. "It's all right," a voice whispered. It was dark there. Peeping out under my bush, I was on my hands and knees in somebody's front yard. I could make out the form of a man crouching close to a hedge on my side of it. My gun was in my hand now. There was no special reason why I shouldn't take his word for it that it was all right. I got up off my knees and went to him. When I got close enough, I recognized him as one of the men who had let me into the Ronnie Street house the day before. I sat on my heels beside him and asked, "Where'll I find Reno?" "Hank O'Mara said he wanted to see me." "He does that. Know where Kid McLeod's place is at?" "No." "It's on Martin Street above King, corner of the alley. Ask for the kid. Go back that away 3 blocks, and then down. You can't miss it." I said I'd try not to, and left him crouching behind his hedge, watching my client's place. Waiting, I guessed, for a shot at Pete the Finn, Whisper, or any of Reno's other unfriends who might happen to call on old Elihu. Following directions, I came to a soft drink and rummy establishment with red and yellow paint all over it. Inside, I asked for Kid McLeod. I was taken into a back room where a fat man with a dirty collar, a lot of gold teeth, and only one ear admitted he was McLeod. "Reno sent for me," I said. "Where'll I find him?" "And who does that make you?" he asked. I told him who I was. He went out without saying anything. I waited 10 minutes. He brought a boy back with him, a kid of 15 or so with a vacant expression on a pimply red face. "Go with Sonny," Kid McLeod told me. I followed the boy out a side door, down 2 blocks of back street, across a sandy lot, through a ragged gate, and up to the back door of a frame house. The boy knocked on the door and was asked who he was. "Sonny with a guy the kid sent," he replied. The door was opened by long-legged O'Mara. Sonny went away. I went into a kitchen where Reno Starkey and 4 other men sat around a table that had a lot of beer on it. I noticed that 2 automatic pistols hung on nails over the top of the door through which I had come. They would be handy if any of the house's occupants opened the door, found an enemy with a gun there, and were told to put up their hands. Reno poured me a glass of beer and led me through the dining room into a front room. A man lay on his belly there, with one eye to the crack between the drawn blind and the bottom of the window, watching the street. "Go back and get yourself some beer," Reno told him. He got up and went away. We made ourselves comfortable in adjoining chairs. "When I fixed up that Tanner alibi for you," Reno said, "I told you I was doing it because I needed all the friends I could get." "You got one. Cracked the alibi yet?" he asked. "Not yet. It'll hold," he assured me, "unless they got too damn much on you." "Think they have?" I did think so. I said, "No, McGraw's just feeling playful. That'll take care of itself. How's your end holding up?" He emptied his glass, wiped his mouth on the back of a hand, and said, "I'll make out." But that's what I wanted to see you about. Here's how she stacks up. Pete's throwed in with McGraw. That line's coppers and beer mob up against me and Whisper. But hell, me and Whisper are busier trying to put the chive in each other than bucking the combine. That's a sour racket. While we're tangling, them bums will eat us up. I said I had been thinking the same thing. He went on. "Whisper'll listen to you. Find him, will you? Put it to him. Here's the proposish. He means to get me for knocking off Jerry Hooper, and I mean to get him first. Let's forget that for a couple of days. Nobody won't have to trust nobody else. Whisper don't ever show in any of his jobs anyways. He just sends the boys. I'll do the same this time. We'll just put the mobs together to swing the caper. We run them together, rub out that damned fin, and then we'll have plenty of time to go gunning among ourselves. Put it to him cold. I don't want him to get any ideas that I'm dodging a rumpus with him or any other guy. Tell him I say if we put Pete out of the way, we'll have more room to do our own scrapping in. Pete's holed up down in Whiskey Town. I ain't got enough men to go down there and pull him out. Neither has Whisper. The two of us together has. Put it to him." "Whisper," I said, "is dead." Reno said, "Is that so?" as if he thought it wasn't. "Dan Rolfe killed him yesterday morning, down in the old Redmond warehouse. Stuck him with the ice pick Whisper had used on the girl." Reno asked, "You know this? You're not just running off at the head." "I know it." "Damned funny none of his mob act like he was gone," he said, but he was beginning to believe me. "They don't know it. He was hiding out, with Ted Wright the only one in on the ware. Ted knew it. He cashed in on it. He told me he got 100 or 150 from you through Peak Murray. I'd have given the big umpche twice that for the straight dope," Reno grumbled. He rubbed his chin and said, "Well, that settles the Whisper end." I said, "No." "What do you mean, no?" "If his mob don't know where he is," I suggested, "let's tell them. They blasted him out of the can when Noonan copped him. Think they'd try it again if the news got around that McGraw had picked him up on the quiet?" "Keep talking," Reno said. "If his friends try to crack the Husko again, thinking he's in it, that'll give the department, including Pete's specials, something to do. While they're doing it, you could try your luck in Whiskey Town." "Maybe," he said slowly, "maybe we'll try just that thing." "It ought to work," I encouraged him, standing up. "I'll see you." "Stick around. This is as good a spot as any while there's a reader out for you, and we'll need a good guy like you on the party." I didn't like that so much. I knew enough not to say so. I sat down again. Reno got busy arranging the rumor. The telephone was worked overtime. The kitchen door was worked as hard, letting men in and out. More came in than went out. The house filled with men, smoke, tension. 25, Whiskey Town. At 1:30, Reno turned from answering a phone call to say, "Let's take a ride." He went upstairs. When he came down, he carried a black valise. Most of the men had gone out the kitchen door by then. Reno gave me the black valise, saying that don't rustle it around too much. It was heavy. The 7 of us left in the house went out the front door and got into a curtained touring car that O'Mara had just driven up to the curb. Reno sat beside O'Mara. I was squeezed in between men in the back seat, with the valise squeezed between my legs. Another car came out of the first cross street to run ahead of us. A third followed us. Our speed hung around 40, fast enough to get us somewhere, not fast enough to get us a lot of attention. We had nearly finished the trip before we were bothered. The action started in a block of one-story houses of the shack type, down in the southern end of the city. A man put his head out of a door, put his fingers in his mouth and whistled shrilly. Somebody in the car behind us shot him down. At the next corner, we ran through a volley of pistol bullets. Reno turned around to tell me, "If they pop the bag, we'll all of us hit the moon. Get it open. We got to work fast when we get there." I had the fasteners unsnapped by the time we came to rest at the curb in front of a dark, three-story brick building. Men crawled all over me, opening the valise, helping themselves to the contents, bombs made of short sections of 2-inch pipe packed in sawdust in the bag. Bullets bit chunks out of the car's curtains. Reno reached back for one of the bombs, hopped out to the sidewalk, paid no attention to a streak of blood that suddenly appeared in the middle of his left cheek, and heaved his piece of stuffed pipe at the brick building's door. A sheet of flame was followed by deafening noise. Hunks of things pelted us while we tried to keep from being knocked over by the concussion. Then there was no door to keep anybody out of the red brick building. A man ran forward, swung his arm, let a pipe full of hell go through the doorway. The shutters came off the downstairs windows, fire and glass flying behind them. The car that had followed us was stationary up the street, trading shots with the neighborhood. The car that had gone ahead of us had turned into a side street. Pistol shots from behind the red brick building, between the explosions of our cargo, told us that our advance car was covering the back door. O'Mara, out in the middle of the street, bent far over, tossed a bomb to the brick building's roof. It didn't explode. O'Mara put 1 foot high in the air, clawed at his throat, and fell solidly backward. Another of our party went down under the slugs that were cutting at us from a wooden building next to the brick one. Reno cursed stolidly and said, "Burn them out, Fat." Fat spit on a bomb, ran around the back of our car, and swung his arm. We picked ourselves up off the sidewalk, dodged flying things, and saw that the frame house was all out of whack, with flames climbing its torn edges. "Any left?" Reno asked as we looked around, enjoying the novelty of not being shot at. "Here's the last one," Fat said, holding out a bomb. Fire was dancing inside the upper windows of the brick house. Reno looked at it, took the bomb from Fat, and said, "Back off. They'll be coming out." We moved away from the front of the house. A voice indoors yelled, "Reno!" Reno slipped into the shadow of our car before he called back. "Well, we're done," a heavy voice shouted. "We're coming out. Don't shoot." Reno asked, "Who's we're?" "This is Pete," the heavy voice said. "There's 4 left of us." "You come first," Reno ordered, "with your mitts on the top of your head. The others come out one at a time, same way, after you, and half a minute apart is close enough. Come on." We waited a moment, and then Pete the Finn appeared in the dynamited doorway, his hands holding the top of his bald head. In the glare from the burning next-door house, we could see that his face was cut, his clothes almost all torn off. Stepping over wreckage, the bootlegger came slowly down the steps to the sidewalk. Reno called him a lousy fish-eater and shot him 4 times in face and body. Pete went down. A man behind me laughed. Reno hurled the remaining bomb through the doorway. We scrambled into our car. Reno took the wheel. The engine was dead. Bullets had got to it. Reno worked the horn while the rest of us piled out. The machine that had stopped at the corner came for us. Waiting for it, I looked up and down the street that was bright with the glow of 2 burning buildings. There were a few faces at windows, but whoever besides us was in the street had taken to cover. Not far away, fire bells sounded. The other machine slowed up for us to climb aboard. It was already full. We packed it in layers with the overflow hanging on the running boards. We bumped over dead Hank O'Mara's legs and headed for home. We covered 1 block of the distance with safety, if not comfort. After that, we had neither. A limousine turned into the street ahead of us, came half a block toward us, put its side to us, and stopped. Out of the side, gunfire. Another car came around the limousine and charged us. Out of it, gunfire. We did our best, but we were too damned amalgamated for good fighting. You can't shoot straight holding a man in your lap, another hanging on your shoulder, while a third does his shooting from an inch behind your ear. Our other car, the one that had been around at the building's rear, came up and gave us a hand.
but by then 2 more had joined the opposition. Apparently, Thaler's mob's attack on the jail was over, one way or the other, and Pete's army, sent to help there, had returned in time to spoil our getaway. It was a sweet mess. I leaned over a burning gun and yelled in Reno's ear, "This is the bunk! Let's us extras get out and do our wrangling from the street." He thought that a good idea and gave orders, "Pile out, some of you hombres, and take them from the pavements." I was the first man out, with my eye on a dark alley entrance. Fat followed me to it. In my shelter, I turned on him and growled, "Don't pile up on me! Pick your own hole! There's a cellarway that looks good." He agreeably trotted off toward it, and was shot down at his 3rd step. I explored my alley. It was only 20 feet long and ended against a high-board fence with a locked gate. A garbage can helped me over the gate into a brick-paved yard. The side fence of that yard let me into another, and from that I got into another, where a fox terrier raised hell at me. I kicked the pooch out of the way, made the opposite fence, untangled myself from a clothesline, crossed 2 more yards, got yelled at from a window, had a bottle thrown at me, and dropped into a cobblestoned back street. The shooting was behind me, but not far enough. I did all I could to remedy that. I must have walked as many streets as I did in my dreams, the night Dinah was killed. My watch said it was 3:30 a.m. when I looked at it on Elihu Wilson's front steps. 26th, blackmail. I had to push my client's doorbell a lot before I got any play on it. Finally, the door was opened by the tall, sunburned chauffeur. He was dressed in undershirt and pants and had a billiard cue in one fist. "What do you want?" he demanded. And then, when he got another look at me, "It's you, is it? Well, what do you want?" "I want to see Mr. Wilson." "At 4 in the morning? Go on with you." And he started to close the door. I put a foot against it. He looked from my foot to my face, hefted the billiard cue, and asked, "You after getting your kneecap cracked?" "I'm not playing," I insisted. "I've got to see the old man." "Tell him." "I don't have to tell him. He told me no later than this afternoon that if you come around, he didn't want to see you." "Yeah?" I took the 4 love letters out of my pocket, picked out the first and least idiotic of them, held it out to the chauffeur and said, "Give him that, and tell him I'm sitting on the steps with the rest of them. Tell him I'll sit here 5 minutes and then carry the rest of them to Tommy Robbins of the Consolidated Press." The chauffeur scowled at the letter, said, "To hell with Tommy Robbins and his blind aunt," took the letter and closed the door. 4 minutes later, he opened the door again and said, "Inside, you." I followed him upstairs to old Elihu's bedroom. My client sat up in bed with his love letter crushed in one round pink fist, its envelope in the other. His short white hair bristled. His round eyes were as much red as blue. The parallel lines of his mouth and chin almost touched. He was in a lovely humor. As soon as he saw me, he shouted, "So after all your brave talking, you had to come back to the old pirate to have your neck saved, did you?" I said I didn't anything of the sort. I said if he was going to talk like a sap, he ought to lower his voice so the people in Los Angeles wouldn't learn what a sap he was. The old boy let his voice out another notch, bellowing, "Because you've stolen a letter or two that don't belong to you. You needn't think you—" I put fingers in my ears. They didn't shut out the noise, but they insulted him into cutting the bellowing short. I took the fingers out and said, "Send the flunky away so we can talk. You won't need him. I'm not going to hurt you." He said, "Get out," to the chauffeur. The chauffeur, looking at me without fondness, left us, closing the door. Old Elihu gave me the rush act, demanding that I surrender the rest of the letters immediately, wanting to know loudly and profanely where I had got them, what I was doing with them, threatening me with this, that, and the other, but mostly just cursing me. I didn't surrender the letters. I said, "I took them from the man you hired to recover them. A tough break for you that he had to kill the girl." Enough red went out of the old man's face to leave it normally pink. He worked his lips over his teeth, screwed up his eyes at me and said, "Is that the way you're going to play it?" His voice came comparatively quiet from his chest. He had settled down to fight. I pulled a chair over beside the bed, sat down, put as much amusement as I could in a grin, and said, That's one way. He watched me, working his lips, saying nothing. I said, "You're the damnedest client I ever had. What do? You hire me to clean town, change your mind, run out on me, work against me until I begin to look like a winner, then get on the fence, and now when you think I'm licked again, you don't even want to let me in the house. Lucky for me, I happened to run across those letters." He said, "Blackmail." I laughed and said, "Listen, who's naming it? All right, call it that." I tapped the edge of the bed with a forefinger. "I'm not licked, old top. I've won. You came crying to me that some naughty men had taken your little city away from you. Pete the Finn, Lou Yard, Whisper Thaler, and Noonan. Where are they now? Yard died Tuesday morning, Noonan the same night, Whisper Wednesday morning, and the Finn a little while ago. I'm giving your city back to you whether you want it or not. If that's blackmail, okay. Now here's what you're going to do. You're going to get hold of your mayor. I suppose the lousy village has got one, and you and he are going to phone the governor. Keep still until I get through. You're going to tell the governor that your city police have got out of hand, what with bootleggers sworn in as officers and so on. You're going to ask him for help. The National Guard would be best. I don't know how various ruckuses around town have come out, but I do know the big boys, the ones you were afraid of, are dead. The ones that had too much on you for you to stand up to them. There are plenty of busy young men working like hell right now, trying to get into the dead men's shoes. The more, the better. They'll make it easier for the white-collar soldiers to take hold while everything is disorganized. And none of the substitutes are likely to have enough on you to do much damage. You're going to have the mayor, or the governor, whichever it comes under, suspend the whole Personville police department and let the mail-order troops handle things till you can organize another. I'm told that the mayor and the governor are both pieces of your property. They'll do what you tell them, and that's what you're going to tell them. It can be done, and it's got to be done. Then you'll have your city back, all nice and clean and ready to go to the dogs again. If you don't do it, I'm going to turn these love letters of yours over to the newspaper buzzards, and I don't mean your Herald crew, the press associations. I got the letters from Dawn. You'll have a lot of fun proving that you didn't hire him to recover them and that he didn't kill the girl doing it. But the fun you'll have is nothing to the fun people will have reading these letters. They're hot. I haven't laughed so much over anything since the hogs ate my kid, brother. I stopped talking. The old man was shaking, but there was no fear in his shaking. His face was purple again. He opened his mouth and roared, "Publish them and be damned!" I took them out of my pocket, dropped them on his bed, got up from my chair, put on my hat and said, "I'd give my right leg to be able to believe that the girl was killed by somebody you sent to get the letters. By God, I'd like to top off the job by sending you to the gallows." He didn't touch the letters. He said, "You told me the truth about Thaler and Pete?" "Yeah, but what difference does it make? You'll only be pushed around by somebody else." He threw the bedclothes aside and swung his stocky, pajamaed legs and pink feet over the edge of the bed. "Have you got the guts," he barked, "to take the job I offered you once before, chief of police?" "No. I lost my guts out fighting your fights while you were hiding in bed and thinking up new ways of disowning me. Find another wet nurse." He glared at me. Then shrewd wrinkles came around his eyes. He nodded his old head and said, "You're afraid to take the job. So you did kill the girl?" I left him as I had left him the last time, saying, "Go to hell," and walking out. The chauffeur, still toting his billiard cue, still regarding me without fondness, met me on the ground floor and took me to the door, looking as if he hoped I would start something. I didn't. He slammed the door after me. The street was grey with the beginning of daylight. Up the street, a black coupe stood under some trees. I couldn't see if anyone was in it. I played safe by walking in the opposite direction. The coupe moved after me. There is nothing in running down streets with automobiles in pursuit. I stopped, facing this one. It came on. I took my hand away from my side when I saw Mickey Linehan's red face through the windshield. He swung the door open for me to get in. "I thought you might come up here," he said as I sat beside him. "But I was a second or two too late. I saw you go in, but was too far away to catch you." "How'd you make out with the police?" I asked. "Better keep driving while we talk."
I didn't know anything, couldn't guess anything, didn't have any idea of what you were working on, just happened to hit town and meet you. Old friends. That line. They were still trying when the riot broke. They had me in one of the little offices across from the assembly room. When the circus cut loose, I back-windowed them. How'd the circus wind up? I asked. The coppers shot hell out of them. They got the tip-off half an hour ahead of time and had the whole neighborhood packed with specials. Seems it was a juicy row while it lasted. No duck soup for the coppers at that. Whispers mob, I hear. Yeah, Reno and Pete the Finn tangled tonight. Hear anything about it? Only that they'd had it. Reno killed Pete and ran into an ambush on the getaway. I don't know what happened after that. Seen Dick? I went up to his hotel and was told he'd checked out to catch the evening train. I sent him back home, I explained. He seemed to think I'd killed Dinah Brand. He was getting on my nerves with it. Well, you mean did I kill her? I don't know, Mickey. I'm trying to find out. Want to keep riding with me, or want to follow Dick back to the coast? Mickey said, Don't get so cocky over one lousy murder that maybe didn't happen. But what the hell? You know you didn't lift her dough and pretties. Neither did the killer. They were still there after 8 that morning when I left. Dan Rolfe was in and out between then and 9. He wouldn't have taken them. I've got it! The coppers that found the body, Shep and Vanneman, got there at 9:30. Besides the jewelry and money, some letters old Wilson had written the girl must have been taken. I found them later in Dawn's pocket. The 2 Dicks disappeared just about then. See it? When Shep and Vanneman found the girl dead, they looted the joint before they turned in the alarm. Old Wilson, being a millionaire, his letters looked good to them, so they took them along with the other valuables and turned them, the letters, over to the shyster to peddle back to Elihu. But Dawn was killed before he could do anything on that end. I took the letters. Shep and Vanneman, whether they did or didn't know that the letters were not found in the dead man's possession, got cold feet. They were afraid the letters would be traced to them. They had the money and jewelry. They lit out. Sounds fair enough, Mickey agreed, but it don't seem to put any fingers on any murderers. It clears the way some. We'll try to clear it some more. See if you can find Porter Street and an old warehouse called Redman. The way I got it, Rolfe killed Whisper there, walked up to him and stabbed him with the ice pick he had found in the girl. If he did it that way, then Whisper hadn't killed her. Or he would have been expecting something of the sort, and wouldn't have let the lunger get that close to him. I'd like to look at their remains and check up. Porter's over beyond King, Mickey said. We'll try the south end first. It's nearer and more likely to have warehouses. Where do you set this Rolfe guy? Out! If he killed Whisper for killing the girl, that marks him off. Besides, she had bruises on her wrist and cheek, and he wasn't strong enough to rough her. My notion is that he left the hospital, spent the night God knows where, showed up at the girl's house after I left that morning, let himself in with his key, found her, decided Whisper had done the trick, took the sticker out of her, and went hunting Whisper. So, Mickey said, now where do you get the idea that you might be the boy who put it over? Stop it, I said grouchily as we turned into Porter Street. Let's find our warehouse. 27th. Warehouses. We rode down the street, jerking our eyes around, hunting for buildings that looked like deserted warehouses. It was light enough by now to see well. Presently, I spotted a big, square, rusty red building set in the center of a weedy lot. Disuse stuck out all over lot and building. It had the look of a likely candidate. Pull up at the next corner, I said. That looks like the dump. You stick with the heap while I scout it. I walked 2 unnecessary blocks so I could come into the lot behind the building. I crossed the lot carefully, not sneaking, but not making any noises I could avoid. I tried the back door cautiously. It was locked, of course. I moved over to a window, tried to look in, couldn't because of gloom and dirt, tried the window and couldn't budge it. I went to the next window with the same luck. I rounded the corner of the building and began working my way along the north side. The first window had me beaten. The second went up slowly with my push and didn't make much noise doing it. Across the inside of the window frame from top to bottom, boards were nailed. They looked solid and strong from where I stood. I cursed them and remembered hopefully that the window hadn't made much noise when I raised it. I climbed up on the sill, put a hand against the boards, and tried them gently. They gave. I put more weight behind my hand. The boards went away from the left side of the frame, showing me a row of shiny nail points. I pushed them back farther, looked past them, saw nothing but darkness, heard nothing. With my gun in my right fist, I stepped over the sill, down into the building. Another step to the left put me out of the window's grey light. I switched my gun to my left hand and used my right to push the boards back over the window. A full minute of breathless listening got me nothing. Holding my gun arm tight to my side, I began exploring the joint. Nothing but the floor came under my feet as I inch by inched them forward. My groping left hand felt nothing until it touched a rough wall. I seemed to have crossed a room that was empty. I moved along the wall, hunting for a door. Half a dozen of my undersized steps brought me to one. I leaned an ear against it and heard no sound. I found the knob, turned it softly, eased the door back. Something swished. I did 4 things all together: let go the knob, jumped, pulled trigger, and had my left arm walloped with something hard and heavy as a tombstone. The flare of my gun showed me nothing. It never does, though it's easy to think you've seen things. Not knowing what else to do, I fired again, and once more. An old man's voice pleaded, "Don't do that, partner. You don't have to do that." I said, "Make a light." A match spluttered on the floor, kindled, and put flickering yellow light on a battered face. It was an old face of the useless, characterless sort that goes well with park benches. He was sitting on the floor, his stringy legs sprawled far apart. He didn't seem hurt anywhere. A table leg lay beside him. "Get up and make a light," I ordered, "and keep matches burning until you've done it." He struck another match, sheltered it carefully with his hands as he got up, crossed the room, and lit a candle on a 3-legged table. I followed him, keeping close. My left arm was numb, or I would have taken hold of him for safety. "What are you doing here?" I asked when the candle was burning. I didn't need his answer. One end of the room was filled with wooden cases piled 6 high, branded Perfection maple syrup. While the old man explained that as God was his keeper, he didn't know nothing about it, that all he knew was that a man named Yates had 2 days ago hired him as night watchman. And if anything was wrong, he was as innocent, I pulled part of the top off one case. The bottles inside had Canadian Club labels that looked as if they had been printed with a rubber stamp. I left the cases and, driving the old man in front of me with the candle, searched the building. As I expected, I found nothing to indicate that this was the warehouse Whisper had occupied. By the time we got back to the room that held the liquor, my left arm was strong enough to lift a bottle. I put it in my pocket and gave the old man some advice. "Better clear out. You were hired to take the place of some of the men Pete the Finn turned into special coppers. But Pete's dead now, and his racket has gone bluey." When I climbed out the window, the old man was standing in front of the cases, looking at them with greedy eyes while he counted on his fingers. "Well?" Mickey asked when I returned to him and his coupe. I took out the bottle of anything but Canadian Club, pulled the cork, passed it to him, and then put a shot into my own system. He asked, "Well?" again. I said, "Let's try to find the old Redmond warehouse." He said, "You're going to ruin yourself sometime telling people too much," and started the car moving. 3 blocks farther up the street, we saw a faded sign, Redmond and Company. The building under the sign was long, low, and narrow, with corrugated iron roof and few windows. "We'll leave the boat around the corner," I said, "and you'll go with me this time." I didn't have a whole lot of fun by myself last trip. When we climbed out of the coupe, an alley ahead promised a path to the warehouse's rear. We took it. A few people were wandering through the streets, but it was still too early for the factories that filled most of this part of town to come to life. At the rear of our building, we found something interesting. The back door was closed. Its edge and the edge of the frame close to the lock were scarred. Somebody had worked there with a jimmy. Mickey tried the door. It was unlocked, 6 inches at a time with pauses between. He pushed it far enough back to let us squeeze in. When we squeezed in, we could hear a voice. We couldn't make out what the voice was saying. All we could hear was the faint rumble of a distant man's voice, with a suggestion of quarrelsomeness in it. Mickey pointed a thumb at the door's scar and whispered, "Not coppers." I took 2 steps inside, keeping my weight on my rubber heels. Mickey followed, breathing down the back of my neck. Ted Wright had told me Whisper's hiding place was in the back, upstairs. The distant rumbling voice could have been coming from there. I twisted my face around to Mickey and asked, "Flashlight?" He put it in my left hand. I had my gun in my right. We crept forward. The door, still a foot open, let in enough light to show us the way across this room to a doorless doorway. The other side of the doorway was black. I flicked the light across the blackness, found a door, shut off the light, and went forward. The next squirt of light showed us steps leading up. We went up the steps as if we were afraid they would break under our feet. The rumbling voice had stopped. There was something else in the air. I didn't know what. Maybe a voice not quite loud enough to be heard, if that means anything. I had counted 9 steps when a voice spoke clearly above us. It said, "Sure, I killed the bitch." A gun said something, the same thing 4 times, roaring like a 16-inch rifle under the iron roof. The first voice said, "All right." By that time, Mickey and I had put the rest of the steps behind us, had shoved a door out of the way, and were trying to pull Reno Starkey's hands away from Whisper's throat. It was a tough job and a useless one. Whisper was dead. Reno recognized me and let his hands go limp. His eyes were as dull, his hoarse face as wooden as ever. Mickey carried the dead gambler to the cot that stood in one end of the room, spreading him on it. The room, apparently once an office, had 2 windows. In their light, I could see a body stowed under the cot. Dan Rolfe. A Colt service automatic lay in the middle of the floor. Reno bent his shoulders, swaying. "Hurt?" I asked. "He put all 4 in me," he said calmly, bending to press both forearms against his lower body. "Get a doc," I told Mickey. "No good," Reno said. "I got no more belly left than Peter Collins." I pulled a folding chair over and sat him down on it so he could lean forward and hold himself together. Mickey ran out and down the stairs. "Did you know he wasn't croaked?" Reno asked. "No. I gave it to you the way I got it from Ted Wright." "Ted left too soon," he said. "I was leery of something like that and came to make sure. He trapped me pretty, playing dead till I was under the gun." He stared dully at Whisper's corpse. "Game at that, damn him. Dead but wouldn't lay down, bandaging himself, laying here waiting by himself." He smiled, the only smile I'd ever seen him use. "But he's just meat and not much of it now." His voice was thickening. A little red puddle formed under the edge of his chair. I was afraid to touch him. Only the pressure of his arms and his bent forward position were keeping him from falling apart. He stared at the puddle and asked, "How the hell did you figure you didn't croak her?" "I had to take it out in hoping I hadn't, till just now," I said. "I had you pegged for it, but couldn't be sure." I was all hopped up that night and had a lot of dreams, with bells ringing and voices calling, and a lot of stuff like that. I got an idea maybe it wasn't straight dreaming so much as hophead nightmares stirred up by things that were happening around me. When I woke up, the lights were out. I didn't think I killed her, turned off the light and went back to take hold of the ice pick. But it could have happened other ways. You knew I was there that night. You gave me my alibi without stalling. That got me thinking. Dawn tried blackmailing me after he heard Helen Albury's story. The police, after hearing her story, tied you, Whisper, Rolfe and me together. I found Dawn dead after seeing O'Mara half a block away. It looked like the shyster had tried blackmailing you. That and the police tying us together started me thinking the police had as much on the rest of you as on me. What they had on me was that Helen Albury had seen me go in or out or both that night. It was a good guess they had the same on the rest of you. There were reasons for counting Whisper and Rolfe out. That left you and me. But why you killed her's got me puzzled. "I bet you," he said, watching the red puddle grow on the floor. "It was her own damned fault. She calls me up. Tells me Whisper's coming to see her and says if I get there first, I can bushwhack him. I'd like that. I go over there, stick around, but he don't show. He stopped, pretending interest in the shape the red puddle was taking. I knew pain had stopped him, but I knew he would go on talking as soon as he got himself in hand. He meant to die as he had lived, inside the same tough shell. Talking could be torture, but he wouldn't stop on that account, not while anybody was there to see him. He was Reno Starkey, who could take anything the world had without batting an eye, and he would play it out that way to the end. I got tired of waiting, he went on after a moment. I hit her door and asked how come. She takes me in, telling me there's nobody there. I'm doubtful, but she swears she's alone, and we go back in the kitchen. Knowing her, I'm beginning to think maybe it's me and not Whisper that's being trapped. Mickey came in, telling us he had phoned for an ambulance. Reno used the interruption to rest his voice, and then continued with his story. Later, I find that Whisper did phone her he was coming and got there before me. You were coked. She was afraid to let him in, so he beat it. She don't tell me that, scared I'll go and leave her. You're hopped, and she wants protection against Whisper coming back. I don't know none of that then. I'm leery that I've walked into something knowing her. I think I'll take hold of her and slap the truth out of her. I try it, and she grabs the pick and screams. When she squawks, I hear a man's feet hitting the floor. The trap's sprung, I think. He spoke slower, taking more time and pains to turn each word out calmly and deliberately, as talking became harder. His voice had become blurred, but if he knew it, he pretended he didn't. I don't mean to be the only one that's hurt. I twist the pick out of her hand and stick it in her. You gallop out, coked to the edges, charging at the whole world with both eyes shut. She tumbles into you. You go down, roll around till your hand hits the butt of the pick. Holding on to that, you go to sleep, peaceful as she is. I see it then, what I've done. But hell, she's croaked. There's nothing to do about it. I turn off the lights and go home. When you dash. A tired-looking ambulance crew, Poisonville gave them plenty of work, brought a litter into the room, ending Reno's tale. I was glad of it. I had all the information I wanted, and sitting there listening to and watching him talk himself to death wasn't pleasant. I took Mickey over to a corner of the room and muttered in his ear, "The job's yours from now on. I'm going to duck. I ought to be in the clear, but I know my Poisonville too well to take any chances. I'll drive your car to some way station where I can catch a train for Ogden. I'll be at the Roosevelt Hotel there, registered as P.F. King. Stay with the job and let me know when it's wise to either take my own name again or a trip to Honduras." I spent most of my week in Ogden trying to fix up my reports, so they would not read as if I had broken as many agency rules, state laws, and human bones as I had. Mickey arrived on the 6th night. He told me that Reno was dead, that I was no longer officially a criminal, that most of the First National Bank stick-up loot had been recovered, that McSwain had confessed killing Tim Noonan, and that Personville, under martial law, was developing into a sweet-smelling and thornless bed of roses. Mickey and I went back to San Francisco. I might just as well have saved the labor and sweat I had put into trying to make my reports harmless. They didn't fool the old man. He gave me merry hell.